the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Hey, fanfic family! So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 301, A Sick Visitor from Afar. Mystery be upon you. What a brand new and vibrant city. Benoit Kevin, a high-ranking alchemist known on the forum as Mithril Unicorn, slowly pushed an elderly man in a wheelchair off the alchemical vehicle. Following closely behind were Ms. Astrologer and Mr. Eye of Illusion. Although Benoit and his companions had arrived in Jackdaw Town 2 days prior, they still observed the proper etiquette between spellcasters, having the Eye of Illusion hand over a visiting list to the agent and receive permission before setting off for the frontier territory. The Eye of Illusion looked down at the teacher Duncan, whose face was pale but his expression was peaceful, and explained in a gentle voice, "This pioneer territory is located in the northern wilderness. The owner is a powerful and mysterious young high-level spellcaster. We have joined a secret spellcaster organization together. Benoit should have mentioned it to you during this period." Duncan narrowed his eyes, looked at the receptionist who was walking towards them not far away, and said softly, "I am not an internal member of your organization. You don't need to relay too much extra information to me to avoid angering the powerful existence behind it." A cold wind mixed with snowflakes blew, making him choke and cough a few times. After a while, he continued, "You three have paid too much for my affairs. The risk of contacting such a secret organization is really dangerous. It really makes me, as a teacher, feel ashamed." Cough. Astrologer Melissa frowned a little reluctantly, and was about to say a few words of comfort when the person in front had already greeted them from a distance. Mr. Eye of Illusion. Ms. Astrologer, Chris, the director of the alchemy laboratory, stepped forward with extraordinary enthusiasm, held the cold arm of the old man Duncan in the wheelchair, and said earnestly, "I'm really sorry, Inspector Uriel, who has been responsible for receiving you, is out on business. The Lord asked me to take over temporarily and arrange your subsequent itinerary." When Eye of Illusion visited the territory before, he had met this eccentric alchemist once. At this moment, he hurriedly and politely introduced him to the other companions who were visiting for the first time. "Mr. Chris, I wonder when His Excellency the Lord will be free to see us?" And, the teacher's limb transplant surgery, Chris waved his hand, made an inviting gesture and smiled. "No need to delay or wait. Lord Harvey gave me instructions in advance. Let's go to the laboratory immediately. If Mr. Duncan's physical condition allows, we can start the operation immediately." The group soon arrived at the independent alchemy laboratory in charge of Chris. After a short rest, they saw the young spellcaster Lord Harvey, who was hurried over with a team of bloodline warriors and 2 tall alchemy creatures. "Sorry, I've been a bit busy with official duties." Harvey glanced around, his gaze fixed on a gray-haired old man hunched over in a wheelchair. Smiling, he stepped forward and shook his hand, saying, "You're Mr. Duncan, right? Welcome to the frontier territory." Duncan's blanketed lower body was bare from the knees, and a drape covered the wound on his right arm, covering the wound on his severed limb. His remaining left arm reached out to clasp Harvey's warm palms, and he whispered, "I haven't had time to thank you yet, you and the organization behind you, for your generous assistance to me." Harvey waved his hand nonchalantly, saying gently, "Your 3 students have already paid the due price. This is all based on the principle of equal exchange. Please don't worry too much." At Harvey's signal, Egno stepped forward and took an alchemical device inlaid with a pale green magic stone from the physician's assistant nearby. He politely said, "Please allow me to examine Mr. Duncan first to confirm that he is in a good condition to withstand the upcoming transplant surgery." The 3 members of the Eye of Illusion nodded in agreement and helped to half-carry Duncan to the lab table, their eyes fixed on Egno and the others as they busily began their various examinations. The main body's magical energy channels aren't seriously damaged, but Mr. Duncan hasn't meditated for a long time, so his magical energy reserves are limited, and his channels are slightly depleted and atrophied. The 3 limb wounds are all festering to some extent. Tisk, 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 tisk. The sutures were rather sloppy. The healer seemed to believe that healing and flesh growth potions alone could restore the wounds to their original state. Benoit, standing nearby, blushed instantly. He opened his mouth but was too embarrassed to argue. He was certainly not a professional healing spellcaster, and to treat his teacher's injuries, he had relied on massive doses of alchemical potions to stall for time. Taking advantage of a break in the examination, Harvey reiterated to Duncan the surgical risks he had previously discussed with the Eye of Illusion. Duncan listened to it in silence, then chuckled a few times in self-deprecating manner, and said lightly, "Triple the risk of surgery? The second best option is to only restore one arm? Spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair? I'm afraid I can't accept it." The Eye of Illusion came forward and said worriedly, "Teacher, this is the safest way. After restoring both hands, you can still perform magic and conduct magical experiments and research. It's just that you need a wheelchair to move around. Melissa, Benoit and I can all stay by your side for a long time, a little inconvenience." Duncan widened his eyes and coughed repeatedly as if he was holding his breath. "Have you ever seen an illusionist who can perform high-level illusion with a broken limb?" Benoit also came closer and whispered, "But Lord Harvey also said that even if we successfully give you 3 alchemical prosthetic limbs, we can't guarantee that your limbs will not be deformed during the illusion technique. That's not your own flesh and blood, it's a metal creation." Duncan rolled his eyes at his student, turned to Harvey and said, "Your lordship, if I choose 2 surgical plans at the same time, I wonder what the price will be? Please feel free to make your request, I will do my best to meet it." This master of illusion seemed to have some obsession that required the restoration of limbs to complete his mission, otherwise he would not be so stubborn and paranoid on this issue. Harvey shook his head helplessly, then said slowly, "First, you'll naturally need to join our spellcaster forum, like Mr. Illusion Eye and the other 3. This isn't really a price you'll pay. I'm sure you'll understand the benefits and profits later. As for the surgery, it's also part of an experimental study. As the first subject, the risks you assume and the data we'll gain from it constitute a significant portion of the cost." As soon as he spoke, everyone understood Harvey's meaning. Using a high-level spellcaster as a subject for a magical research project was something even the top brass of the Spellcaster Union couldn't easily do. The data and research results that could be obtained would naturally be invaluable. Unlike experiments using less intelligent monsters or alien races, the research feedback gained was incomparable. Chapter 302, Alien Limb Transplantation. Alienated limbs? The Eye of Illusion was momentarily speechless as it gazed at the row of alchemical prosthetic limbs dangling from the experimental rack. Crab-like metal hexapods, foldable mantis arms connected to an artificial spine, and a wheeled half-torso connected to the thorax. Even the caster would consider these things heretical, even without waiting for the church's priests to pronounce judgment. "Is this the safe surgical plan you told me about?" The Eye of Illusion exchanged a glance with its teacher, swallowing hard. "With all due respect, these prosthetic limbs don't look safe at all." Harvey nodded in understanding, slowly explaining, "This is a prosthetic structure we've specially designed to minimize surgical risk. Compared to humanoid prosthetics, which require the transplanted body to assimilate, these beast-like prosthetics offer a much better fit. In other words, transplanting Duncan's humanoid prosthetic limbs would require him to draw upon his own soul energy to absorb and assimilate the fragmented souls within the limb, merging them into a single piece. However, due to the large number of missing parts, the soul stitching procedure would be extremely risky. However, if soul fusion were abandoned and grafting were the only option, Duncan, the recipient, would only need to tame and manipulate the prosthetic limb, effectively avoiding the potential risk of fusion. Duncan looked at these animal-shaped prosthetic limbs with a burning gaze, and suddenly realized, these alchemical prosthetic bodies have been adjusted in shape according to the state of the illusion spell? This is an unprecedented experimental idea. Chris came closer with a smile and reminded him, "Please rest assured, Mr. Duncan, these alchemical prosthetic limbs are all made of rare magical metal minerals, and the soul cores contained in them are also carefully selected and transformed from the most suitable magical creatures." He tilted his head slightly, and used his eyes to ask Harvey's consent. After a pause, he continued, "And, if conditions permit, the soul core part of the operation can be completely replaced in the later stage. Even if you find a living dragon, we can find a way to successfully convert it for your use." Duncan's body trembled slightly uncontrollably when he heard this, and he murmured to himself, "The ancient dragon can also have its soul extracted for me to drive. It is really what I have dreamed of for decades." He was stunned for a moment before coming back to his senses. He bowed his head to Harvey with determination and said sincerely, "Your Excellency, Please transplant as many of these alchemical limbs for me as possible. There is no need to consider too many surgical risks. I am willing to bear this part of the cost. This way, I can provide you with more research data for the experiment. Astrologer Melissa blurted out in horror. Teacher. No. This is too dangerous. Mithril Unicorn Benoit quickly covered her mouth and pulled her aside to comfort her. Follow the teacher's choice. Everything is based on his wishes. Harvey smiled and said, you three can arrange for one of you to watch the entire surgical experiment, and the rest of you will need to leave the laboratory temporarily and wait in the rest room outside. The operation may take a long time, and you need to maintain a certain amount of patience. The Eye of Illusion stepped forward first. Please let me stay here and accompany Teacher Duncan. After everyone retreated one by one, only Harvey, Chris, Igno, and the Eye of Illusion, who were left there to watch, were left in the operating center of the alchemical laboratory. Duncan looked around with some confusion and took the initiative to ask, I heard from Jin and Melissa that, Lord, it seems that there are 2 spellcasters under your command who have undergone soul transformation and accommodated themselves within a complete alchemical body. Harvey explained with a smile. Yes, they are currently busy with other matters and have not come to participate in the surgical experiment. I will formally introduce them to you later. The Master of Illusion nodded in understanding and said expectantly, if the operation fails, my soul will also be transferred to an alchemical body according to the established plan, right? I wonder if it will be possible for me to perform illusion after becoming an alchemical creature. Chris hurriedly said, don't be so pessimistic, Mr. Duncan. That is just the last insurance measure we have in place in case the operation fails. We won't consider it unless it is absolutely necessary. Igno, who had been prepared for the operation, came forward wearing a full-body coated protective suit, dismissed Chris who was still chattering, and said calmly, okay, I will perform the first part of the operation, Mr. Duncan. I will first use anesthetics to put you into a state of mental clarity but limb anesthesia. The wound on your broken limb will be re-incised, and after the limb is repaired, it will be sutured again. Chris walked aside and began to put on the protective headgear required for the operation, and continued in a muffled voice, I will be responsible for the second part. I will first graft a part of artificial metal spine for you, to restart nerve control of the lower limbs. Duncan listened blankly, and finally couldn't help but said, Gentlemen, why don't you just do it? There is no need to explain the details of the surgical experiment to me in detail. I feel a little creepy. Harvey turned his head to look at Mr. Eye of Illusion, who was standing outside the glass wall of the operating room. He almost pressed his whole body against the glass cover, and his face was a little deformed. He seemed to be very concerned about every move of everyone in the operating room, and his concern for his teacher was beyond words. You have 3 excellent students, Mr. Duncan. Harvey patted the bound and secured illusionist on the operating table with one hand, and soothed him softly. Next, please enter deep guided meditation. I will use my mental power to infiltrate the magical network with you and complete the crucial soul suturing process. Outside the alchemy laboratory's operating room, astrologer Melissa paced restlessly. The minutes ticked by, and the operating room door remained closed. Mithril Unicorn Benoit, noticeably calmer, sat on the sofa with a cup of warm fruit tea brought by the alchemist apprentice, glancing around. Melissa, remain patient and trust Mr. Kilthuzid. He is the form's only real-world representative. His magical knowledge and alchemical skills far surpass those of the high-level spellcasters and alchemists you and I know, and with Jin watching closely from inside, it was impossible for anything major to go awry. The astrologer sighed and sat down. Of course I trust Mr. Kilthuzid's skills. I'm just worried that the teacher isn't in good condition and won't be able to survive the arduous surgery. You know, the teacher is already old, while high-level spellcasters, due to their increased power levels, live far longer than ordinary mortals. Their magical and mental powers remain abundant, their flesh and blood bodies inevitably fall into the frailty of age. Benoit took a sip of his hot tea and asked helplessly, then tell me, do you know the teacher's true age? Haha, not to mention you and me, even Jin, who has served the teacher the longest, doesn't know how old he is. Melissa was stunned for a moment, her eyebrows raised. Just as she was about to put on her senior sister's airs and teach her younger apprentice a lesson, the door to the surgical lab suddenly opened. Jin Gavin, the Eye of Illusion, stumbled out, his face pale. How is it? Did the surgery go smoothly? The two hurriedly gathered around, anxiously inquiring. The Eye of Illusion opened its mouth, unsure how to explain. Finally, it could only mutter, the operation went exceptionally smoothly. But the teacher, The teacher doesn't even look like a normal human anymore. Chapter 303, A New Path for Illusion. Mr. Duncan, next please try to drive your prosthetic arm to complete the movements of grasping and releasing. Okay, please try to drive your lower limbs. Yes. Keep moving at a constant speed. Can you successfully guide the magic power in your body to the transplanted limbs? Try to complete a spell guidance. Duncan raised the alchemical prosthetic arm, which was not yet very docile, and stumbled to complete the guidance of the simplest arcane magic. Looking at the arcane magic power slowly condensing in the silver-white metal palm, he smiled with satisfaction. Harvey noticed the slight sluggishness in his spellcasting and quickly offered a reassuring word. The magical energy channels designed into the alchemical prosthesis are far more extensive than those in your current body. It only requires a period of recovery to regather the abundant magical energy within your body, and you'll be able to cast spells as quickly and instantly as before. Duncan's transplanted alchemical arm was completely different from a normal human limb, primarily to accommodate the potential transformations he would employ. Besides the portion that replaced the original limb, the prosthesis also incorporated a retractable metal mantis arm grafted onto the ribs, connected to an artificial spine on the back. Normally, it could be folded up and concealed beneath the mage's robes. During transformation, it could become part of his beastly mimicry, assisting in combat. In other words, Duncan, the master of illusion, now possessed 3 arms. But compared to the more conservative prosthetics on his upper limbs, his lower torso was a truly astonishing addition. Harvey, drawing direct inspiration from the design of the alchemist wolf spider, grafted 3 pairs of metal insect legs onto Duncan. These, too, could be folded together to form 2 slightly elongated human legs for normal use. However, without the concealment of his mage's robes, these long metal legs appeared somewhat disproportionate in both thickness and length. Upon performing a transfiguration spell, each leg instantly split into 3, transforming Duncan into a grotesque, 6-legged crab-like form, endowed with a special ability to climb and suspend, indistinguishable from the alchemist wolf spider. As his 3 students trembled as they entered the surgical lab, Duncan, under Harvey's guidance, was attempting to perform his signature transfiguration spell. After a terrifying sound of flesh and bone scraping against metal, Duncan successfully transformed into his werewolf form, his former specialty, for the first time since his injury and disability. However, compared to his student Eye of Illusion, his transformation was slightly different. Although still in werewolf form, his body was noticeably taller and more robust. His formerly hairy flanks suddenly gave way to 2 sharp metal blades extending from his back. These blades could retract and stretch freely, appearing incredibly flexible. The fleshy lower limbs were replaced by 2 sturdy metal limbs, but their design was more like that of a large magical beast. Instead of bending forward like a human, the knees curved strangely backward, somewhat resembling the toes of a scaly creature. This offered significant advantages. It gave his already heavy and bulky body greater explosive power during jumping and exerting force. After several attempts, Duncan's body, which had long since been deprived of meditation due to his injury, quickly ran out of magic power, and he was forced to end the transformation with a sense of regret. Teacher, how do you feel now? The Eye of Illusion hurried forward to support Duncan and helped him sit back on the operating table. Duncan lifted his newly transplanted metal prosthetic arm and stretched it a bit, muttering with deep emotion, I originally thought I'd never be able to perform the transfiguration spell again in my lifetime, but I didn't expect it to be true. He looked up at Harvey standing beside him, and bowed his head sincerely again. Your Excellency, please allow me to express my highest respect and gratitude as a spellcaster. If it weren't for your help, I might not even have the courage to live. Harvey smiled and nodded in response. That's not necessary. The surgical experiment has also verified obvious flaws. You may not be able to perform the avian transfiguration state in the future. Although the metal prosthesis provides a strong body bridging function, its flaws in the transfiguration state are also very obvious. Your flesh and blood body cannot bear such a heavy metal part and soar freely in the sky. Chris came up and added, moreover, the newly transplanted limb still needs you to repeatedly adapt to it. After receiving feedback, the details will be readjusted. So you will probably need to stay here for a long time to cooperate with us in completing a series of post-operative observation experiments. After saying this, he stole a subtle glance at Harvey, and the two exchanged a knowing nod. Now, not only would Mr. Duncan's 3 high-level spellcasting students be able to remain in the territory, providing them with free services for a long period of time, but even the high-level illusionist himself would be working for Harvey for free. Astrologer Melissa quickly fetched a long-prepared mage robe to cover her teacher's terrifying 6 interlocking metal insect legs. She said with lingering fear, "My lord, I wonder what we'll do next." "Don't worry, I've already prepared a separate courtyard for Mr. Duncan to recuperate. You can stay in the territory and don't need to return to Jackdaw Town." The Eye of Illusion and the mithril unicorn exchanged a glance, feeling a little embarrassed. It seemed like they hadn't paid anything, yet in return they had received such strenuous rescue and subsequent hospitality arrangements. No matter how they thought about it, they felt ashamed of having taken advantage of the situation. Fortunately, their teacher, Duncan, thought for a moment before finally speaking. "Your Excellency, there is no need to be so polite. Although my body needs to recover and be observed for a period of time, the 3 of us are all in good health and full of energy. If you need them for anything, please feel free to ask." Harvey was delighted and asked directly without hiding anything. "I heard that Mr. Duncan and your 3 students are all from the Orland Royal School of Magic, and they are all talented spellcasters." He paused, looking at the 4 confused masters and apprentices, and continued slowly, "I have always hoped to establish a small private magic school in this northern wilderness. It has indeed accepted quite a few magic apprentices from St. Valen who were persecuted by the church and the nobles. The only difficulty is that the teaching staff is a little insufficient. I wonder." Before Duncan could speak, the Eye of Illusion and the astrologer immediately said in unison, "Do you need us to provide magic enlightenment for those children and guide the apprentices' promotion?" "There is no problem at all." Chris quickly leaned in and interrupted, "Could you please assign Mr. Benoit to my alchemy lab? I've always wanted to collaborate and exchange with independent high-level alchemists in the Southern Territory. There are many alchemy projects in the labs in the territory that are still waiting to be launched. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels." Chapter 304, Southern Migrants. After a long, bumpy night, the alchemy vehicle from Jackdaw Town finally arrived at the gates of the Northern Frontier Territory in the early morning hours. The vehicle's hatch opened, and the passengers, huddled inside, laden with various bags and belongings, emerged, bewildered. They were all new to the wildlands north of Jackdaw Ridge, and instinctively huddled together in the snow whipwind. Under the guards' loud urging, they inched uneasily toward the city gates. Each alchemy vehicle can only carry a maximum of 50 civilians at a time, and we've only managed to carry less than 500 people in a round trip. We'll have to make several more trips to complete this mission." The guard's pilot, who was directing and operating the alchemy vehicle, jumped out of the front cockpit, wiping the snowflakes from his face and complaining to the guards registering at the city gates. As previously agreed, civilians from the southern border, migrating from all over Grizzly Territory, have been arriving in Jackdaw Town in recent days. The makeshift shelters previously erected there were clearly inadequate in the depths of winter, forcing the Pioneer Territory City Hall to immediately begin relocation efforts, transporting them to the wasteland as quickly as possible. The City Hall had already set up a makeshift office at the city gates, and each group of arriving civilians, guided by the defense forces, lined up in an orderly manner to undergo the routine identity registration process. Shepherd Knight Ambich Kenny stood at the city gates, rubbing his hands, occasionally glancing up at the crowd gathering outside. Finally, he spotted a familiar figure, his fiancée, Sophia. She was dressed in a thick, off-white cotton dress, a cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders for warmth, and carrying a thin, small bundle. Standing at the back of the group, Ambich suppressed his excitement and quickly stepped forward, hugging her tightly, drawing the attention of the surrounding crowd, who murmured in agreement. "How daring! Sophia, you actually dared to come to the wasteland to find me alone. God, you don't know how worried I have been these past few days after receiving your reply." Sophia's pale face was red from the cold, but she still smiled brightly. "When the news of Earl Fagan's defeat reached Milltown, I also learned that your father was unwilling to pay the ransom. People in the town were talking about you being sentenced to death by hanging by the Lord of the Wasteland. At that time, I had only one thought in mind, to come and see you for the last time no matter what." She slowed down, tears in her eyes, and whispered softly, "Fortunately, you were pardoned and reunited with me safely." Ambiki's eyes welled up slightly upon hearing this. The day after settling into the frontier territory, he begged his new boss for a note of guarantee and sent a letter to his fiancée to let her know he was safe. But he didn't dare mention anything about waiting for his return. After all, the prerequisite for a pardon required several years of service to the Lord in the wasteland. He couldn't have the audacity to let a girl wait in vain at home. Who could have known that this stubborn girl would actually reply with a letter announcing her plans to meet him in the wasteland? Ambiki had just received the reply the day before yesterday, and now Sophia stood before him. "How have you been these past month, Ambiki?" Noticing the teasing glances from the crowd, awkwardly released his fiancée's arms and awkwardly changed the subject. Sophia was silent for a moment, then said calmly, "I quit my job as a governess." This was undeniable. Since she had taken the initiative to join the list of candidates for migration to the southern border, no matter what her previous occupation was, she would have to obey the orders of the feudal lord and move her family to the wasteland to serve the new lord. Okay, it's okay," Ambiki comforted her hurriedly. "Although I was just pardoned, I was immediately assigned a job. The salary is decent, and it's no problem to support you. Work? Don't you need a job?" Sophia was a little surprised. She looked down at Ambiki and realized that her fiancé did not seem to be treated poorly as a defeated prisoner. Not only were his hands and feet not shackled, but there were no soldiers or guards following him to monitor and control his personal freedom. Generally speaking, if defeated prisoners of war were not redeemed, half of them were sentenced to hard labor and sent to mines or forests to work as coolies. In order to prevent them from escaping, they were often required to wear shackles all the time. The families of prisoners of war were treated the same way, the only difference was that they did not have to do the same heavy labor. Ambiki understood what she meant and explained with a faint smile, "I'm not a prisoner of war or slave of the Lord at the moment. The territory's city hall has arranged a job for me to herd livestock. Except for not being able to leave the northern border at will, I'm completely free the rest of the time. Come on, follow me home first. After I settle you down, I have to go back to the farm to work in the afternoon." He took Sophia to a separate registration shed at the city gate, took out a stamped approval slip from his pocket and handed it over, whispering carefully, "Sir, this is the identity registration guarantee for the family members of the territory residents. Please take a look." The city hall official in charge of the registration of migrant population took the slip and briefly compared it, then said with a teasing look, "Well, strictly speaking, a fiancé can't be considered a family member of the territory residents, but, if you go to the city hall to register as a formal and legal couple within the next month, it's not impossible to find a loophole and add this lady's identity information to your household registration." As he spoke, he pulled out a blank ID card, quickly filled it out, and expertly pricked Sophia's index finger with a sterilized metal probe, completing the registration process. "Mr. Kenny, you must register your marriage within a month. Don't forget." Ambich blushed, dragging his fiancée away at a rapid pace, silently taking the city hall official's kind reminder to heart. "Where do you live?" Sophia blushed, but she took the initiative to change the subject, inquiring about Ambich's current living situation. Ambich finally came to his senses, rubbed his burning cheeks, and whispered, "Feng Shao Community. The house I'm assigned to rent is in Feng Shao Community. Most people working at the Ministry of Agriculture live in that area, not too far away." Community. Sophia was once again puzzled. To be honest, when Ambich was first assigned the job, he hadn't expected much. As a defeated captive, he was lucky to have a shelter. Just like the destitute serfs in Grizzly Castle, he lived with a dozen people crammed into one shed. But when he was finally led by a city hall official to his assigned housing complex, he was rather surprised. The housing this wasteland lord had allocated to ordinary farm workers was truly, well, wasn't it? The residential complexes in the Pioneer Territory weren't gated. They walked along the spacious main street to an intersection, then followed the metal signs to the side roads. Both the main street and the side roads were paved with neat, even cobblestones. Two specially dug, stone-lined drainage ditches lined the sides, leaving the entire street free of mud and snowwater. Sophia surveyed the surroundings cautiously, uncertainly. These houses look like they belong to nobles and officials. "Are you sure you remember the location correctly?" Ambichi gave a helpless smile and was about to point out his own residence when a city scavenger, sweeping snow on a nearby street corner, spotted him and spoke first. "Mr. Kenny, you didn't go to work on the farm today." The old man tilted his head slightly and saw Sophia standing behind Ambichi. He quickly took off his felt hat and held it in his hands, smiling and greeting her. "Oh. You brought your wife to the Pioneer Territory so soon? Good morning, Mrs. Kenny." Chapter 305 Teacher Recruitment. Sophia stood at the doorway, her hands covering her mouth in disbelief. "This whole room is allocated to you, of course," but she felt a blush on her face wouldn't fade anytime soon, so she could only smile shyly. "Room 3, second floor, Building 12, Feng Shao Community. Remember not to get lost. The houses in this area are all built identically, and it's easy for new residents to get lost, compared to other residents in the territory." Ambachi's assigned room wasn't particularly large. It was just an ordinary one-bedroom apartment with a separate bathroom and kitchen, a living room, and a bedroom less than 8 square meters. While not spacious, it was fully furnished. 2 thick brass pipes, half recessed into the walls of the living room and bedroom, emanated from one side. Sophia could feel the steam rising from them from a meter away. She didn't feel cold at all in this room, apparently thanks to these 2 strange pipes embedded in the wall. This is the residential complex's HVAC system, the work of the Lord's alchemists and spellcasters, Ambriki said with a smile, pointing to the heating ducts on the wall. Without these miraculous magical artifacts, staying indoors would probably make people sick in the winter in the wasteland. But with them, it's so warm indoors that you need to take off your heavy coats. The Lord's magical creations can actually be freely enjoyed by the common people of the territory. Ambriki, this is unbelievable. Sophia was amazed and subconsciously gathered and folded the clothes that her fiancé had deliberately hung out to dry next to the heating ducts, which made Ambriki feel even warmer. He rushed into the small kitchen and took out the frozen cheese from the cupboard and the staff meal he had brought back from the farm after get off work yesterday, half a pound of bread, also a little dry and hard, but it was white bread baked with refined flour. He'd only been working for less than a week and wasn't yet eligible for a salary. His kind boss had lent him 30 gold coins for emergency expenses, but he also provided lunch on the farm. "You haven't eaten on this trip yet, have you? Just fill up first. I'll bring you more food after get off work tonight." Sophia, seeing her fiancé's awkward expression, couldn't help but smile and reassure him. "Don't worry about our future, Ambriki. When we just registered for entry, didn't the city hall official casually mention that the territory is short of staff for all kinds of work? I'll be out tomorrow to see if there's any suitable opportunity." Ambriki was silent for a moment, remembering that his fiancée had been hired as a tutor for a baron's children back in their hometown of Milltown. She was treated with respect and privilege when she visited the noble's mansion, and her living conditions were far better than they were now. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have had to come to the frontier territory and search for a job in the dead of winter. After learning that Sophia was coming to live with him in the Pioneer Territory, Ambriki quietly inquired with his fellow aboriginals after get off work. Farm workers earned 80 gold yuan a month, and as an apprentice deputy team leader in the breeding department, he would receive an additional 20 gold yuan in subsidies upon becoming a full-time employee. Although rent and heating costs would be deducted from the housing provided by the Lord, the total salary was a solid 100 gold yuan. According to local colleagues, prices in the Pioneer Territory have always been very stable. A single man could live comfortably with 50 gold yuan a month, enjoying a comfortable life with plenty of food and drink every now and then, and still have plenty left over for daily necessities and outings. But providing for 2 people was a bit of a stretch. Filling his stomach was certainly no problem, but Ambriki wasn't content with simply being able to support his fiancée. He wanted Sophia to enjoy the warm clothing the local indigenous people wore every day, the light vehicles they rode to and from get off work, and the delicious and novel foods that lined the streets at the convenience market. He wanted to make sure Sophia could enjoy them all, to justify her reckless decision to come to him. "I'll work twice as hard." Before he could finish his words, there was a gentle knock on the door. Ambriki quickly opened it and found 2 clerks in City Hall uniforms standing outside. "Does Ms. Sophia Kenny live here?" "Yes, may I ask, what can I do for you?" The clerk took out a thick manual tucked under his arm and handed a thin leaflet to Ambriki. "Ms. Sophia's registered occupation when entering the city is a tutor. According to regulations, she is a special talent, so we came here specifically to inform her. Please go to the talent market in the territory's City Hall tomorrow afternoon to participate in the recruitment of teachers in the Pioneer Territory Public School." "School?" "The Pioneer Territory actually founded a school." Sophia poked her head out in surprise. Is it responsible for teaching the children of lords and vassal nobles? The two clerks looked at each other and laughed. They are not nobles, but ordinary civilians' children. We don't have any nobles here. Sophia was stunned for a moment and didn't react. Commoner children? What can they teach? Etiquette? Music? Theology? The clerk shook his head and pulled out a new leaflet, handing it over. Of course, it's about teaching them to read and write. You can take a look at the public school's daily schedule. On the reverse is the salary for junior teachers. If you're comfortable with it, please go to the job market tomorrow for the interview. After a brief introduction, the two hurried off to the next house, leaving Ambriki and Sophia standing at the door, bewildered. Teaching commoner children to read and write? What's the point? Are they supposed to become knights or noble squires under the Lord's command? Sophia patiently took the two-page flyer and sat down in a chair in the living room to read it carefully. The curriculum at this territory's public school didn't seem complicated. A junior teacher's job was simply to teach the most basic literacy courses, teaching commoner children to read and write. Nothing else. For a noble tutor like Sophia, this was perfectly simple. A junior teacher's salary is 120 gold yuan? That's more than what I make as an apprentice deputy team leader in the Ministry of Agriculture's livestock breeding group. Ambriki, perceptive enough to notice the details he'd been most interested in, remarked in surprise. Sophia smiled. Great, Ambriki. I didn't expect someone would offer me such a lucrative job just after arriving in the frontier territory. You're right. Everything here looks so much better than back home in Milltown. Chapter 306, Fishing Law Enforcement. Hello, Officer Max Anton. A young man, upon seeing Max enter, stood up from his chair and shook his hand. Just call me Candlelight. The newly established Grizzly Fort Police Department branch was temporarily housed within the former Grizzly Fort City Guard headquarters. Senior Constable Max had been selected to oversee the city's security. Confused, Max glanced around, noticing that the young officer, Candlelight, and the others seated behind him were not wearing the standard Pioneer Territory Police Department uniforms, but rather casually dressed in ordinary civilian winter clothing. Are you the secret police officers sent to Grizzly Castle this time? Why don't you wear police uniforms when you are not on a mission? Candlelight smiled and said, Officer Max, we are different from ordinary police officers like you. As long as we are not lying in bed and sleeping, we are always on duty. After he said that, he pointed to several colleagues behind him and explained briefly, after Earl Fagin was defeated, we immediately set out to sneak into Grizzly Castle and began to collect intelligence according to the secret order issued by the Lord. No wonder. Max muttered in his heart. He heard that when the Northern Army counterattacked Grizzly Castle, they received information about the deployment of the Earl's family troops from the city in advance, as well as some newly drawn maps of the city. It seems that these are all the masterpieces of these secret police officers in private. Are you all from the wasteland? Candlelight pointed at the chilblain behind her ear. I'm from the south. The wastelanders' accents and appearance are slightly different from ours, so it's easy to be discovered if we sneak into the city. This was the main reason why Superintendent Uriel and Chief Asdalon didn't choose officers like Max who had undergone prosthetic limbs when selecting undercover agents. Their metal limbs exposed outside their clothing were too conspicuous. Even standing on the street, even a few dozen meters away, would reveal the police's presence. Besides being a deterrent, Max couldn't conduct any covert intelligence work. Having been a police officer for over a year, Max felt the daily workload was endless, often even working overtime on weekends. Dealing with daily disputes among the territory's residents was one of the most tedious tasks. Besides accepting the constant influx of refugees, police cooperation was also required. Catching troublemakers and vicious criminals was also a necessary task. The army now had completely abandoned its responsibility to maintain security within the territory, aside from pioneering the city defense and conducting combat missions. As for Grizzlyburg, a massive city with a population of nearly 10,000, it was also very different from what he had expected. The city patrols under the former lord, Count Fagin, performed police duties, but they seemed to operate without any specific rules or regulations. Due to their meager pay, they often exploited the public for extra income, colluding with gangs to extort protection money. In times of war, they also had to respond to the Lord's call to arms, either ascending the city walls to participate in defense or accompanying the knights on expeditions. But in the frontier territory, the police and the military were completely separate departments, each handling their own internal and external responsibilities, never conflated. However, The identity and scope of the undercover police were extremely vague, often leaving Max puzzled. Superintendent Uriel personally oversaw the identities, appearances, and information of these individuals, leaving even a senior officer like himself unaware of how many such shadow colleagues the police department had recruited and trained. In addition to direct missions from the lords and police, their operations also relied heavily on spontaneous reports from the people of the territory. Indeed, after experiencing several assassination attempts on their lords and the infiltration of spies from southern nobles, the local residents of the Pioneer Territory had taken it upon themselves to monitor any new immigrants they considered suspicious and quietly report them to the police. While much of this information was based on groundless suspicions, this massive local intelligence network, built by the people themselves, made it difficult for enemies and spies attempting to infiltrate the territory to conceal their identities, resulting in their swift capture. Max came back to his senses and asked in a deep voice, "Now, what mission do I need your help on this time? I've only received instructions from Superintendent Uriel, and I have no idea what the case is. We've received 2 reliable tips. Someone seems to be secretly purchasing grain from the frontier territory and, through the frequent travel between the 2 immigrants, secretly transporting it to Grizzly Castle for sale." Candlelight pulled 2 pieces of paper from his pocket and handed them to Max. One of them looked like a crumpled and then unfolded papyrus, while the other was clearly made of stationery. Max, an experienced man, could tell at a glance that the paper must have come from a secret report from the people of the territory, but the stationery. "You actually opened letters between people? How is this legal?" Candlelight shook her head nonchalantly. "Smuggling grain is a serious crime under the laws of the territory. Facing such cunning and treacherous criminals, only by following their example and using every possible means can we defeat them, protect the property safety of the people of the territory, and uphold the authority of the Lord." Good one. This person's ideological awareness is even higher than that of ordinary police officers. It seems that he has received many lessons from Chief Arstelin on a daily basis. Well, if the evidence is conclusive, why don't you just make the arrests? How can we ordinary police officers cooperate? Candlelight chuckled and said calmly, "Officer Max, our mission requires us to catch the criminal red-handed. We can't arrest people with just 2 pieces of paper. This will seriously damage the reputation of the police department and cause the public to distrust us." Max sighed. He had been assigned to Grizzlyburg on official business for nearly half a month. His group of police officers in dark gray uniforms were too conspicuous. The sight of these powerful robocops in the city would spread immediately to all residents in the area, making them as eye-catching and dazzling as the illuminating magic stone in the dark night. Any criminal or illegal activity already underway would immediately scatter upon hearing the news, making their security mission extremely difficult. The locals of Grizzly Castle weren't friendly to these northern wastelanders, let alone the slightest bit of trust. When disputes arose, they preferred to involve local gang members rather than inform these airborne outsiders. "The reason we need your cooperation on this case is to draw out those guys. I apologize for the description, but your mere presence would be like a boulder dropped into a toilet, startling a swarm of flies. This would make our covert operations much smoother." Max grimaced, but he had to admit the other party was right. Letting them lure the snakes out of their lair, while these shadows cast their nets to catch them, sounded like a good plan. Fishing spree wasn't just a technique reserved for these undercover detectives. Max had also secretly learned a lot from Chief Arstelin. It was said that the Lord himself had proposed these principles. Chapter 307 Rats and Flies. The rat has appeared. Everyone, beware, a young undercover detective, huddled in a corner, whispered to his colleagues in ambush in the alley. Candlelight nodded, crouching in the shadows of the street corner and saying calmly, "Don't alert the enemy. Let's just keep pretending to be looking for work." This guy clearly came unarmed, probably looking for a buyer. An undercover detective in the alley adjusted his felt hat, exchanged a glance with Candlelight, and quietly departed. 3 blocks away, Officer Max and his men, feigning patrol, awaited their message. Rat Hunt was the temporary codename for the operation. With the police department's overt cover and diversionary tactics, the undercover detectives targeted a target who frequently frequented the civilian area in less than 3 days. 4 or 5 people took turns keeping watch daily, finally figuring out their movements. The target seemed well aware of the police department's daily patrol frequency and fixed routes, meticulously choosing the time to reappear after the airborne officers had left their patrols. So, Candlelight and the other undercover police officers donned tattered coats, disguising themselves as odd job laborers. They blended in with the locals, stalking the streets of the city's main streets. If they spotted the rat appearing or passing through, they would be unable to escape their surveillance. The rat wandered around the main street for a few rounds before disappearing into a corner shop. The main street in Grizzlyburg's urban area was home to several shops run by the local guild, primarily engaged in the purchase and sale of grain, salt, and sugar. A short while later, the rat emerged from the shop, leading a middle-aged man who looked like a clerk, and hurried back to their home across the street. The clerk was followed by 2 donkey carts pulled out from the shop's backyard, clearly on their way to haul some goods. "Damn it, he's really smuggling grain." Candlelight clenched his fists and cursed in a low voice with gritted teeth. How did he get so much grain? The grain in the territory market is clearly limited and needs to be purchased with a resident ID card. He suddenly thought of something, widened his eyes and said angrily, "Damn it, could it be that the people in the storage department are stealing? Bastard. He simply doesn't take the laws promulgated by the Lord seriously." A young spy behind him couldn't help but urged in a low voice, "Boss. What are you waiting for? Let's arrest him immediately." Candlelight took a deep breath, suppressed his anger, waved his hand and said, "No hurry, he can't do this dirty work alone. If we want to catch him red-handed, we have to wait patiently for all the rats to emerge." He had already arranged for officers to notify Officer Max's patrol squad, and they would soon block off all major intersections in the residential area. For now, all they had to do was keep an eye on Rat until he completed his transaction and then track him down to identify the speculators secretly purchasing grain. Sure enough, not long after, Rat and his clerk appeared from a street corner, pulling 2 heavily loaded donkey carts. They carefully navigated secluded alleys and side streets, arriving at the side entrance of a shop on the main street. A middle-aged man with a bald head and a paunchy belly had been waiting there. Seeing the carts approach, he looked around cautiously for a moment before slowly approaching, opening the cloth bag and inspecting it. Then, with a satisfied smile, he pulled a small bag of coins from his pocket and handed it to Rat. Action. Candlelight decisively gave the order to arrest them. 4 or 5 undercover police officers simultaneously rushed out from the street corners and alleys, pounced on their targets, and froze them in their tracks. Candlelight immediately kicked the stunned Rat over, pinning him to the ground on his back. Dozens of silver and copper coins spilled from the still warm purse in his hand. "You're under arrest. Uriel, using the magical brain communication device specially granted to the police by the Lord, reported to Harvey a case of residents hoarding grain and transporting it to Grizzly Castle to secretly sell it to local merchants." Looking at the long, eloquent report sent to him by the senior superintendent, Harvey put down his quill and sighed. The 2 laws of the frontier territory, limiting grain purchases and strictly prohibiting private sales, had been repeatedly preached and publicized to the people. It was surprising that some people would still choose to take such a risk for such a small amount of money. "Wait." Harvey slapped his head suddenly, turned to Reiner beside him and asked, "What is the limit on the amount of food that residents of the territory can buy every month with their ID cards?" Reiner was silent for a moment, took out his work manual, flipped through it, and replied, "Sir, if calculated per capita, it is more than enough to feed the people. After all, only wheat, flour, salt, sugar, tobacco and alcohol are subject to purchase limits. Bread, dairy products, meat and other foods that are not easy to store for a long time are open to sale." Harvey narrowed his eyes and said angrily, "Then tell me, how did they ensure that they would not go hungry and still save hundreds of pounds of whole wheat and secretly transport it to Grizzly Castle to sell it?" As he said that, he slammed the table in anger and rarely got angry at Reiner and Asdalen. "A nest of rats was born in my territory's warehouse." Reiner snapped his workbook shut and, without a word, knelt and bowed to Harvey. He had no idea how the people had managed to save so much food from their daily rations and sell it privately, but since the Lord was accusing him, it must have been some oversight in his work, and kneeling down to apologize was the right thing to do. Asdalen was much calmer. Although his duties as the City Hall's general manager were merely to assist Reiner, the Lord was furious, so he knelt on one knee and apologized. Then he stood up and walked to the magic brain communicator, quickly transcribing the interrogation results sent by Superintendent Uriel and handing them to Harvey. "Sir, please calm down. This was indeed an oversight on our part, but there's no problem with the territory's storage area." The chief advisor glanced at Reiner, who was kneeling on the ground in a daze, and whispered to defend his colleague, The daily entry and exit and patrols of the storage area are all handled by the alchemymen, and the municipal officials in charge are the first group of old people to join the territory. They are diehards trained by Reiner himself, and they would never steal from the warehouse and enrich themselves for such a small amount of money. Harvey looked at Reiner, who was kneeling tremblingly, and his anger subsided by half. Then he began to carefully read the case interrogation report sent by Uriel. It turned out the problem wasn't the nasty rats in the territory's storage area, but the Ministry of Agriculture, the department responsible for animal husbandry. Even more amusing and unsettling, Harvey realized that the grain smuggling he'd assumed was actually related to old wheat harvested 2 years prior, stored in the warehouse. After the bumper harvest of the new year, he'd ordered it used as livestock feed. Despite the dry, cold desert, the old wheat had inevitably become slightly damp from its long storage. With food now relatively affordable, this old grain was perfect for livestock feed. However, some of the ministry's residents, accustomed to hardship, disagreed. This was large, plump, readily available grain. Feeding it to livestock was a complete waste. Even if it was damp and moldy, it was still hundreds of times better than the potato tubers, rhizomes, and wild vegetable bark they dug from the earth during famines. So several people in the territory made a secret plan and secretly saved some of the old wheat that was crushed and mixed with grass every day. After accumulating it for a while, they sent an accomplice who moved from the southern border to transport this batch of damp wheat mixed with a lot of grass residue and sawdust under the pretext of returning to grizzly territory to visit relatives. It was a pleasant surprise to be able to exchange it for some money. After figuring out the whole story of the case, Harvey couldn't help but hold his forehead with his hand. He raised his hand to signalize Dallin to pull Reiner up from the ground, and ordered speechlessly, "It does not look like a serious crime. But since the territory laws have provisions, and it is the first case of this kind, it is natural to impose a severe sentence. Only in this way can a negative example be set up to warn other people not to take risks for this. A 1,000-mile dam can also be breached by an anthole." Since there are perfect territory laws in place, Harvey believes that the method of killing the chicken to scare the monkey must be used, otherwise these little flies who originally had no bad intentions will sooner or later evolve into big rats who specialize in taking advantage of loopholes to harm his interests. Chapter 308 Public Trial. Ever since the Pioneer Territory's City Hall was built, the small square at the main entrance had been decorated with numerous wooden notice boards. All the territory's laws, regulations, job openings, and conscription notices were posted there. Every morning, noon, and evening, City Hall officials, armed with alchemical loudspeakers, would stand by the notice boards and loudly repeat the announcements, answering questions and providing answers for the onlookers. Furthermore, many local residents, who had received basic literacy education, would take the initiative to come to the square during their free time to explain the announcements to the illiterate newcomers, earning praise and compliments, satisfying their own vanity of being able to read and write. But today, the situation was slightly different. A wooden platform had been erected in the center of the city square for the first time, surrounded by a circle of police officers in formal uniforms. This intimidated the gathered citizens waiting to see the excitement. 3 days ago, the City Hall had posted a notice announcing a public trial for a criminal in the square. While the frontier territory was affluent, recreational options were meager. Aside from playing cards in public chess and card rooms after get-off work, the only entertainment options were during a few major festivals. Hearing that the Lord would personally judge a criminal delighted the locals. Not only would they get to witness the wise and benevolent Lord in public, they might even get to see the despicable Southerner swinging from the gallows after his trial. This would be a topic of conversation for a long time to come. Even before the trial began, the wooden platform in the square was already packed with residents. Since work wasn't an option on a public holiday, a few snowflakes drifted from the sky, but the excitement of the spectators was palpable, completely ignoring the chill brought by the wind and snow. When Lord Harvey stepped down from the alchemical vehicle, the crowd erupted in cheers. He ascended the pre-erected stands and gazed at the crowded, bare-chested residents waving enthusiastically at him. He couldn't help but sigh in emotion. In just 2 or 3 years, these once displaced and poorly clothed wastelanders had truly embraced this pioneer territory as their homeland, pledging their loyalty to him, a commoner spellcaster lacking even noble status, as if he were a distinguished lord. Amidst waves of cheering, the first criminal to face public trial was brought forward. This was the only member of the church's Inquisition army who had survived the attack of 2 high-level spellcasters during the battle at Jackdaw Town and had been captured alive by the Bloodline warriors. Though only a low-ranking combat priest, he served as a fitting example of a villainous enemy. Facing the surging crowd below the dais, the priest's pale face grew even more dismal. He had witnessed such scenes many times in Jinhu City, but only during high masses and rituals held by the bishop, when hundreds, even thousands, of believers bowed in worship. But the situation now was clearly different. The red-faced, agitated masses looked at him with undisguised resentment and contempt. He even saw many clutching pre-prepared stones and balls of mud. If it weren't for the uniformed soldiers repeatedly suppressing them, they would have likely attacked him. Harvey stood up from his high-backed chair, smiled, and waved to the crowd, signaling for silence. "My people, please be quiet," he spoke through the alchemical loudspeaker, and the noisy crowd immediately quieted down like sheep. "I've gathered you all here today to publicly expose several shameless crimes." The priest, forced by 2 bloodline warriors, knelt on the dais, his forehead almost touching the ground. "As you all know, a while ago, the Lord of Grizzle Castle colluded with the church and brazenly invaded our territory. However, our people's army lived up to expectations, intercepting and annihilating the enemy in Jackdaw Town." The crowd erupted in enthusiastic cheers. "However, there is another despicable conspiracy that demands to be laid bare before you. You deserve to know the full truth. Remember that unprovoked plague? Many of you present must have been forced to flee your homes and settle here because of that plague, right?" Harvey pointed at the priest kneeling beside him and shouted, "The church spread this plague themselves. Not only did they unleash it throughout the southern kingdoms, they also attempted to collude with Earl Fagin of Grizzle Castle to invade our territory and bring the plague to our homeland." The crowd immediately buzzed with discussion, and many of the newly arrived refugees from the southern border looked puzzled. Harvey raised his hand and asked the guards to bring a complete set of evidence and displayed it on the podium for everyone to see. "The army has confiscated a large amount of evidence from the captured and killed church inquisitors, the secret order delivered by the bishop of Jinhu City himself, the bottle of plague virus liquid, the potion for treating the plague, there's even a document with the seal of Grand Duke St. Valen. Now, these things." The priest raised his head with difficulty and opened his mouth to try to argue, but suddenly he felt a bit of icy cold coming from the place where his shoulder was pinched by the warrior behind him. The coldness instantly spread to his neck and head, making him paralyzed again and lower his head. "My subjects, many of you must have been devout believers of the church, right? Come forward and take a closer look. Look at the glorious seal of the Archbishop of Jinhu City, look at the royal seal of Grand Duke St. Valen. These are things that cannot be faked." A middle-aged man with ugly scars on his face after the plague spots faded squeezed to the front of the platform, got closer to identify them carefully, and exclaimed, "It's real. I am a resident of Jinhu City, and the bishop's glorious seal cannot be imitated at all." He was dumbfounded for a moment, his face slightly distorted, turned his head and shouted, "The plague was actually caused by the church. They actually have the nerve to use the divine potion to treat the plague and ask us to donate half of our property in exchange for a chance to live." A middle-aged woman with graying hair also struggled to the front. She glanced at the evidence in the guard's hand and collapsed to the ground, wailing, "My 2 children, they tragically died during their escape from the worsening of the plague. They didn't make it to Jackdaw Town, didn't have the chance to receive the Lord's free medical treatment and shelter." "Oh, God!" 2 police officers immediately stepped forward, gently helped the middle-aged woman to her feet, and led her to a nearby shed to calm her nerves. The 2 victims from the southern border came forward to testify to Harvey's claims of the church's shameless conspiracy and evil crimes. The crowd, mixed with many refugees from the southern border, was immediately swept up in the boiling emotions. "Damn the church! Damn the southern nobles! My family members all died in the plague. These charlatans should pay for their lives. Everyone, look at that priest. He hangs his head without saying a word. How can this not be a confession? Hang him. Hang the priests of the church. Revenge for our dead relatives." Harvey narrowed his eyes and, while the southern refugees in the crowd were excited, he added fuel to the fire, stirring up the emotions of the local wastelanders as well. "Do you know why the Lord of Grizzly Castle colluded with the church to wage war against us? Those nobles heard rumors from somewhere that gold mines were dug up in our territory and our people were rich, so they became greedy and evil like robbers, and brazenly sent troops to plunder the frontier territory, abduct the people and make them serfs, steal the food and wealth we have worked hard to accumulate, and burn down the comfortable houses you have bought with great difficulty. The local people who were of wasteland origin did not empathize with the plague suffered by the refugees from the southern border, but once their own interests were involved, the hatred and anger they erupted were no less than those of the new people who had lost their families and children. What? Gold mines? Where do we get gold mines? They are all excuses for the nobles to send troops to plunder us. These dog nobles want to rob us of our property? Dream on. My house and bicycle were bought with installment loans. I haven't paid them off yet, and they're already planning to do so? Damn it, My 3 sons are all in the army. They joined the army to protect the security of the territory and everyone's property. They will never be robbed by these shameless southern nobles. The indignant voices of the people gradually became unified. Finally, a stone flew from nowhere and hit the priest who was being escorted to his knees on the platform. Immediately afterwards, there was only one voice left in the entire public trial. Hang him, hang the church's charlatans, hang the southern nobles, be careful. Don't hit the Lord with a stone. You idiot. Chapter 309 The Aftermath of Hatred. My lord, Superintendent Uriel and Commander Pierce request an audience. The guards at the study door knocked and reported to Harvey. Let them both come in. Pierce, his face brimming with joy, and Uriel, a hint of worry on his face, walked side by side into Harvey's study. Just as Uriel was about to salute, Pierce spoke first. My lord, after yesterday's public trial, the military recruitment office has been flooded with new immigrants from the south, eager to sign up. It seems that using public trials to ignite public solidarity is truly effective. Harvey rolled his eyes helplessly. This guy was truly insatiable. With over 20,000 pioneers supporting a professional army of over 3,000, Harvey was already feeling financially stretched, and yet he was still obsessed with expanding the army. There's no new conscription order, so why are they going to the military recruitment office to join in the fun? Even if they were expanding the army, at least half of these new immigrants from the Southern Territory wouldn't pass the recruitment office's physical fitness test. Don't you know that? Harvey's stern face and scolding finally cooled Pierce's passion. Scratching his head and thinking about it, he realized that it made sense. The Southern Territory immigrants were indeed much less physically fit than the natives of the bitter North. Judging by their stature alone, they were noticeably shorter than the natives of the wasteland. If the military selection standards were followed, 9 out of 10 would be rejected on the spot. Then, the garrison gap at Grizzly Fort. We can't just rotate the defense forces and the Northern Territory troops there forever, right? It's a large city with a population of nearly 10,000. 500 people alone, just to man the gates and maintain external security, would be a bit tight. Pierce's temper had subsided, but he still addressed the matter at hand. Harvey knitted his brows, pondered for a moment, and said, it's not like we won't recruit anyone. First, fill the job vacancies in the territory's various production departments. The remaining new immigrants can be trained as militia and assigned to the garrison on the East Coast. While they ensure agricultural production, they can also quickly integrate into the territory. At the very least, their ideological outlook needs to be completely transformed. With that, he reluctantly approved a note for an additional 500 militia units and tossed it to the beaming Pierce, finally sending him off. Now then, what's going on with the police? Uriel, much calmer, stepped forward and reported slowly, Sir, yesterday's public trial focused entirely on the church and the southern nobility, leading to their subsequent interrogation. Those criminals involved in grain trafficking haven't served as a good warning to the public. I'm worried. Harvey paused. After the trial of the church priest yesterday, he'd left without bothering to observe the hanging, completely oblivious to the subsequent case. What? The onlookers are very tolerant of this kind of behavior of enriching themselves and damaging the interests of the territory. Uriel shook his head and explained, it can't be said to be tolerant. After these people confessed their crimes on the spot, although they didn't enjoy the treatment of being pelted with stones and smashed with mud, it was obvious that the mood of the onlookers was not hostile. Everyone just shouted and scolded them. And there was no big objection to the final decision to sentence them to 3 years of hard labor in the mines. Harvey smiled and said, that's it. I don't want the people to be completely swept up by the emotions of hatred, nor do I want to intimidate them through overly harsh laws. I just need to instill one concept in all the people in the territory: don't steal, or you will be caught stealing a little bit of old grain that was originally going to be scrapped and selling it privately. Being fined and having personal property confiscated and doing hard labor for 3 years is already a relatively serious punishment. It is enough to have a typical case here as a precedent. One more thing, sir. After yesterday's public trial, many families of former church believers among the southern immigrants took the initiative to take their altars, statues, and offerings from their homes to the city square and burn them. The police department sent personnel to maintain order, but they didn't stop them. Harvey burst out laughing. This was exactly what he had intended by holding the public trial yesterday. Over 60% of the wastelanders in the occupied territories had little religious faith. As they struggled to survive in the harsh, cold lands of the north, they had no deities like the god of light to offer them the slightest help. Thank God when they were full, damn God when they were hungry, was the norm. But the growing number of southern immigrants was completely different. They lived in a peaceful land completely unmolested by evil orcs and demons. Aside from the usual oppression from noble lords, most had never experienced war or severe famine, so most of them had some foundation in faith, and a large number were only casual followers of the Church of Light. Arriving in the northern frontier, where religious practices were completely absent, they spontaneously enshrined the religious symbols they carried with them in their homes to compensate for not being able to attend church. Some even bravely approached the city hall, requesting missionaries to build a church. This was not the outcome Harvey had in mind. Forcibly depriving them of their faith would surely spark hidden resentment among the people. Rather than sowing the seeds of such discord, it would be better to openly and honestly accuse the church of past conspiracy, thoroughly exposing its past schemes and freeing these shallow believers, whose faith was already weak, from the church's control. A similar public trial needs to be held in Grizzly Castle as well. Although the church's clerics have all evacuated, the church still remains within the city. Place some spies among the people and quietly spread the truth about today's trial. Let public opinion and emotions ferment for a while before completely igniting their suspicion and hatred of the church. Harvey said to Uriel in a calm tone, I will have City Hall simultaneously issue tax exemptions and rent reductions for the people of Grizzly Castle and the surrounding territories. Earl Trevor, the new head of the Fagan family, will also fully cooperate. By then, the people of the city will clearly understand which side to side with to reap the real benefits. Uriel couldn't help but cheer up. My lord, he said, this way, the people of Grizzly Castle will undoubtedly turn to us. Within a month. I'm afraid they will take the initiative to demolish the remaining church and nearby monastery without us having to do anything. After all, compared to praying day and night to the God of Light, who never answered the prayers, the benefits they gained from the wasteland lord, who could reduce rent and taxes and enact various laws that benefited the people, were far greater. Without the church and the Grizzlies, the common people would also pay significantly less tax on believers, and would no longer be forced to respond to the church's call for free labor during the winter, such as repairing churches and expanding monasteries. Even a fool would know which choice to make. Chapter 310 The Dwarf's Wish. In the southern hills, in the Crypt City, the Crypt Dwarf, Copperhammer, nicknamed Frost Giant in the forums, sat rubbing his hands in front of the magic brain instrument, smiling and pointing at the crystal screen to take credit for his brother's work. Nolly, look! The war between the Federation and the Church of the God of Light and St. Valen and Datius has made us a lot of money. Humph, those magic stone chambers of commerce that are nominally affiliated with the Federation don't dare to be as shameless as usual in front of us. Nolly, the dwarf leader with a thick beard, pondered for a moment and asked hesitantly, why should the Federation give us some points instead of directly exchanging them for real money or supplies that our tribe has always been in short supply? He suddenly thought of something, and complained angrily with wide eyes, you won't use all the points we have accumulated with great difficulty to draw cards in the adventure game of the Magic Tower? Copperhammer, these are public property. Not toy chips for you to use to play magic games. Copperhammer rolled his eyes and muttered, the points I use to draw cards are all earned by myself through information transactions on the forum. As for the part obtained from consignment sales and material transactions on the Magic Network, I have never used a single cent without permission. Seeing his brother's puzzled look, he said with a hint of pride, although we chose to side with the Federation in the forum referendum, how can we not make them pay back for our support? This wasn't just a false promise. We actually demolished the city's sparse churches and monasteries. As the leader of the dwarves, Nolly was busy with all sorts of affairs. Unlike Bronzehammer, he couldn't spend long hours on the forums, freely colluding with members of other tribes. Naturally, he wasn't sensitive to trivial information on the forums beyond important events. But Bronzehammer was different. He was one of the few high-level intellectuals among the dwarves of the cave city who had studied abroad in the magical capital of LA. Naturally, he had many private connections. Coupled with his secret relationship with the elves in the Southern Minority Alliance, he had a wide range of online friends on the forums and was thriving. The reason I'm exchanging magic stone orders for the public points of those Federation members is because I received a piece of gossip from the core group of the forum recently. The forum is going to open up access again. Nolly, our chance to squeeze some people in has come again. The dwarf leader was stunned for a moment, and said in disbelief, "Really? Is this news true? Which core members leaked it? Are they those legendary gentlemen?" Copperhammer showed a mysterious expression and whispered, "Legendary, sir? Humph, I accidentally learned about it from Mr. Clothusid. What is a legend in the forum? Can it compare to the only agent of the forum?" The two brothers looked at each other, and at the same time, they turned on their magic brain instruments and began to quickly calculate the number of points they currently had. For a long time, the points earned through the exchange of knowledge and information on the forum as a single person using a Copperhammer were extremely limited, forcing anyone who wanted to join the Lanley group to pay for them. However, as the forum's trading section gradually expanded, with the introduction of anonymous consignment sales and bulk material delivery, the points of the forum's only two burrowing dwarves gradually increased. But then, unexpectedly, the forum established a magic encyclopedia, a veritable treasure trove of magical knowledge. The dwarves, long subjected to racial discrimination and academic oppression, were overjoyed. They immediately invested heavily in acquiring previously inaccessible human magical knowledge and began organizing centralized training for talented young spellcasters within the group who, for various reasons, were unable to enter the human realm for magical education. I also secretly leaked the news of the forum recruiting new members to the elves. Nolly, you should understand my intention. Every time the forum recruits new members, both of our tribes must seize the opportunity to let people in. This is not a goal that can be achieved in a year or two, but as time goes by, we can always gather a force in the forum that can barely contend with those human spellcasters who are not united. The dwarf leader nodded solemnly. He understood completely what the grand goal of his brother, who seemed out of touch on weekdays, really wanted to achieve was, once their group of spellcasters of ethnic minorities in the South had a certain scale of voting rights in the forum, they could seek an opportunity. Seek the mysterious organization behind the forum to follow the principles of freedom, openness, inclusiveness, and anonymity as founded on its founding purpose, so that humans who have long held the power of magical knowledge for thousands of years can abandon racial prejudice, open up academic exchanges, and let all alien spellcasters in the South who yearn for peace and truth can freely go to the human kingdom and receive equal and fair magical education like human spellcasters. The elves will also be able to collect enough points this time to get a high-level wizard into the forum. We don't need to be too radical, just keep the same number of people as them. Tongchu closed the crystal panel of the magic brain instrument, took out a letter from the desk drawer that was obviously opened, but still retained traces of the magic seal, and handed it to his brother Nolly. I plan to proceed in two steps. On the one hand, we'll recruit people from the forum. On the other hand, I want to select a group of young children from my clan and send them to Mr. Clothusid. His spellcaster territory can withstand even the combined attack of the church and the nobility. It must be large in scale and extremely powerful, and its security goes without saying. The key is to establish a close cooperative relationship with this forum agent in real life. Nolly took the letter doubtfully and muttered, he and the Federation are on great terms. Why would he accept our unwarranted overtures? Sending someone there would seem like we're trying to steal their magical knowledge. How could he agree? Tongchu chuckled and said mysteriously, a long time ago, he and I had a deep discussion on the forum. He asked me for a clue to an ancient legend about the source of magic. As you know, no one on the forum knows more about these magical deposits buried deep in the earth than me. The source of magic? You mean? Nori asked, somewhat bewildered. You mean the source of magic in the entire real world, mentioned repeatedly in the ancient texts passed down through our people? Bronzehammer. My people were born and raised underground, and we've long known that there was nothing more than a legend our ancestors used to fool children. Mr. Clothusid may have been deceived by some fabricated rumor in some obscure biography, but don't you know it's nonsense? As early as the days of the Ancient Magic Council, countless legendary and gifted spellcasters had proven beyond a doubt that the source of magic came from the energy escaping from the extra-dimensional magic web. To gain the ability to manipulate magic, Spellcasters must learn to meditate and channel it, drawing magic energy from the magic web through spatial barriers. Magic stones, on the other hand, are merely concrete mineral artifacts formed by the condensation of magic web energy that intrudes into the real world. They don't simply exist, but they also have no real source. Copperhammer shook his head and sighed softly, but that Mr. Kilthuzid told me personally that he unearthed magical relics from ancient times deep underground in the Divine Spine Mountains. Those are not traces of dwarven activity. We can't dig through a mountain as huge and hard as the Divine Spine Mountains. This shows that the magicians of ancient times were also looking for something, but apart from the magic stone veins and the legendary source of magic deep underground, what else could be more attractive to them? So he turned to you for answers and clues? Just to decipher this ancient rumor and secret, yes, he recently sent me a formal invitation letter in person, Nolly. This agent doesn't discriminate against our alien identity. He said that he has established a brand new magic academy in his territory and asked you if I am interested in sending some dwarven children there to learn magic. This is the first time in my life that I have received an invitation from a high-level human spellcaster to accept our teaching of magic. How could I refuse? You have to know that the reason why Brown's Hammer was able to get the opportunity to go to Alea as an alien to study magic was because the former leader of the dwarves, who was also their biological father, led the warriors of the tribe to participate in the brutal battle to assist humans in fighting against the demons. He paid the price of nearly 90% of the warriors of the tribe being killed in exchange for an admission quota that the other party condescended to give him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311 Forum Recruitment. The new week Spellcaster Forum Exchange meeting began promptly at 9 o'clock. Forum members with both the right to attend and speak immediately flooded the public chat room, seemingly logging in long in advance to wait. Everyone was well aware of the central theme of today's exchange, the Spellcaster Forum's new round of member referrals. Aside from the original batch of free members from the forum's early days, this was the forum's third public recruitment drive. The first round offered very low entry requirements. Initial members only needed to pay 100 points and provide a one-on-one referral, which, after review by the forum administrators, would allow them to successfully invite a new member. The second round of recruitment was much more demanding. For unknown reasons, the forum opted to release a limited number of spots through an auction. 2 of these spots were quickly secured by members with apparent Federation affiliations, offering a hefty price in exchange for points and supplies. Furthermore, thanks to the Federation's outstanding contributions to the creation of the Magic Encyclopedia, the forum also secured 3 valuable designated slots from the 2 official forum leaders, Administrator Turing and Observer Neumann. Most active forum members are well aware of the current forum composition, and those with Federation backgrounds undoubtedly dominate. Such a large organization of spellcasters entrenched in the southern continent could easily leverage its resources and connections to establish a dominant position within the Magic Network Forum. The Federation currently has nearly 9 members officially affiliated with the forum, not including several internal members who lack trading, speaking, or voting privileges but can attend meetings and assist in managing the encyclopedia section. Other forum members privately refer to them as semi-privileged members, the dwarves and elves, who have privately formed the Southern Minority Alliance. Each possess 2 fully privileged forum members and maintain a semi-public presence. The other dozen or so independent members mostly hailed from a relatively large spellcasting organization within the 7 wizarding kingdoms. They didn't form a particularly close faction, collaborating only briefly when necessary. Harvey had initially kept a close eye on this group, fearing their numbers would outnumber the smaller members of the Federation and potentially influence public opinion within the forum and the direction of certain key issues. However, he subsequently skillfully addressed this issue through various means. At least 3 independent members, Astrologer, Eye of Illusion, and Mithril Unicorn, were currently enjoying comfortable stays in his frontier territory, and they owed him a significant debt of gratitude. This meant that the independent members and the Federation had achieved a balance of power, to a certain extent. Harvey's official role as forum agent also meant he had a few vassal members. As usual, the exchange meeting began with the opening address from Mr. Elemental Hand, a calm and elegant independent spellcaster who, in Harvey's eyes, had become the standard bearer of etiquette within the spellcaster forum. Hand of the elements, praise Mr. Turing, Mr. Noeman. Good evening, everyone, son of flame, great, great. Good evening, everyone. Let me announce the explosive opening good news to you all first. The Federation's Battle Mage Corps has successfully carried out 3 large-scale counterattacks, pushing the invading demon forces back from the Evil Moon Mountains to their frontline central fortress. We have also cut off nearly half of the dozens of supply lines they opened up. Upon hearing this, everyone spoke in congratulations. It seems that with a powerful anti-magic weapon Lance of Annihilation, the Federation can independently cross the border and launch a counterattack against the demons even without relying on the assistance of the Church and the 7 Wizarding Nations Alliance. This is good news for all spellcasters living in the southern continent. Frost Giant, you guys seem to be fighting fiercely in the northern wastes, but I heard the Church took advantage of the situation and stabbed you in the back. They allowed several demonic forces from Broken Tooth Valley to invade the Western Territory, wreaking havoc on the surrounding human settlements for hundreds of miles, turning the area into a mess. Son of Fire, for Holden, watched the sarcastic remarks of his longtime star-marked friend on the crystal screen of his magical brain, his teeth itching with rage. However, while the words were harsh, they weren't meant to provoke him. This guy was openly and implicitly accusing the Church of disregarding the safety of their fellow humans and allowing the alien races to invade and slaughter ordinary people. Sure enough, this immediately sparked discussion on the forum. Ghost Captain, a bunch of short-sighted charlatans. No matter how the conflict between the Union and the Church intensifies, no matter how intense the civil war, as fellow humans, we must unite to resist alien invasion and protect our own kind. Do they still have the nerve to constantly preach their hypocritical doctrine of God loves the world? Shield, on the one hand, they condone the demon invasion and allow their own kind to be slaughtered. On the other hand, it's likely that the small-scale conflicts with us along the lines of St. Valen and Dalius have intensified, leaving them somewhat stretched. Earthbender, you should be thankful they haven't been so shameless as to use large numbers of their followers as human shields in a direct confrontation with you. Otherwise, this supernatural civil war, currently confined to the Central Kingdom, would have spread across the entire continent, becoming impossible to control. The Earthbender's Principality of Barclay borders St. Valen. He's clearly more concerned with the human conflicts erupting around his homeland than the Evil Moon Mountains thousands of miles away, and he desperately wants them to avoid spreading to his own country. Harvey silently observed the crowd's passionate enunciations of the Church of Light for a moment. Seeing the atmosphere had calmed, he slowly switched to the administrator's codename and served the main course of today's exchange meeting. Administrator Turing, everyone, the Spellcaster Forum is reopening to new members today. I'm sure everyone has received some news by now. Scorching Lord, Mr. Turing, I'm wondering how many points we need to pay for this new member recruitment, and what other additional membership requirements are there. Administrator Turing, it's simple. 5 new member slots will be available, each worth 1,000 points. Each fully authorized member can only redeem 1 slot once, and points cannot be redeemed with secular currency or other magical materials. After the forum administrator's words, the chatroom fell silent. 1,000 points, that's no small sum. A single member simply couldn't accumulate such a large sum. The forum is full of points-consuming activities, from opening separate encrypted chat rooms, to anonymous consignment fees, to tiered fees for reading the Magic Encyclopedia, to instantaneous magic network transport for bulk supplies. Enjoying the forum's cutting-edge and convenient magical services, and acquiring valuable magical knowledge and experimental materials through risk-free transactions, paying points for these services is a natural consequence. Not to mention that, under the forum's organization and guidance, members have forged an unprecedented spirit of solidarity and mutual assistance. Whenever they encounter a difficult problem, they can always count on the dedicated assistance of the forum and other members. This benefit is priceless to all members. The first recruitment is worth 100 points. The second auction is worth 500 points. The third is worth 1,000 points. A chilling thought looms in all members' minds. If forum access is solely based on points, it will become increasingly difficult and expensive. This means that if they want to recruit members for their own factions without spending points, they must at least make a certain level of outstanding contribution to the forum, just like the Federation. Chapter 312 5-Year Compulsory Education. After 3 days of heavy snow, the entire frontier territory was blanketed in a thick blanket of snow. Crystal clear ice crystals clung to the eaves, crackling with the occasional whistling wind. The freezing cold outside didn't bother the children, who were concentrating on their studies in the classroom. Harvey had mandated the installation of copper heating pipes in the territory's public schools since their inception. He couldn't bear to see these future seedlings and flowers of the territory shivering in the cold wind as they learned and grew. Teacher Sophia. Why are sun and sunlight not described by the same word, but named with two special words, Teacher Sophia? Don't flowers and buds both refer to flowers growing in the garden? What's the difference between them, Teacher Sophia? Sophia, who used to be a tutor for nobles, stood on the podium, closed the textbook helplessly, maintained a gentle smile and explained patiently, of course they are different. Although the meanings of these words you mentioned are similar, they do not refer to the same thing. The sun releases warm sunlight, and flowers grow buds before they bloom. Although the wastelanders and the southerners belong to the same human ethnic group, over thousands of years, due to the differences in living areas and surrounding environments, the language systems formed have gradually become quite different, at least in accents and some commonly used vocabulary. There are many differences. Sophia noticed that the older the native wastelanders, the more distinct their speech and accents became. Sometimes, they spoke so quickly that she could barely understand them, only vaguely grasping the gist, though not completely at odds with each other. She admired the Lord's foresight in education, starting from the very beginning, ensuring that these children, now living in the new territory, learn and use a common language and writing system would help them integrate more quickly and eliminate regional prejudices. At least, there would be no mutual disdain between most of the native wastelanders and the new immigrants from the south, who gradually migrated in, simmering with subtle conflicts over lifestyles and attitudes. The Lord's own handwritten elementary education guidelines, with their repeated reference to the concept of New Northlanders, sought to instill in this new generation of children a fundamental sense of unity and solidarity, regardless of origin. Sophia is currently a trainee teacher. Although public school teaching positions are extremely scarce, her superiors have only assigned her a limited teaching role in elementary Chinese and grammar. For now, she's solely responsible for teaching 3 classes of children basic literacy, including introductory courses in reading, writing, and grammar interpretation. The salary isn't much less, but the work is far easier. Compared to Mr. Colin, the math teacher next door, at least she doesn't have to stay up late memorizing and understanding the Lord's multiplication table. As a full-time teacher, she must diligently learn new knowledge on her own before transferring it to her students. I heard that Mr. Colin also teaches at a nighttime literacy school for adults, leaving him with a packed schedule. With his age and limited mobility, the workload is truly overwhelming. Okay, dear children, today's grammar class ends here, Teacher Sophia. A colleague from the primary teaching department poked his head into the classroom and stopped Sophia, who was about to pack up and leave. When the city hall sent the news just now, you were still in class and had not received the notice. Please stay in school for a while after the class. Is there anything wrong? Sophia asked puzzledly. The colleague put away his smile and said in a serious voice, the Lord and the Dean of the college, Mr. Asdalen, will come to inspect the school at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The heads of the junior, middle and senior teaching departments are on high alert. All teachers are required to stay and listen to the work instructions of the Lord. As soon as the afternoon bell rang for the 5th time, Lord Harvey and Chief Advisor Asdalen appeared in the college auditorium of the Pioneer Territory Public School on time. Looking at the dozens of teachers from various departments sitting solemnly below, they said directly without a trace of nonsense. Before the end of winter, I require that the primary and secondary teaching departments of public schools expand enrollment across the board, and include the children of immigrants from the southern border who have newly moved into the territory into the schools. Asdalen slowly opened the work manual and reported rationally and clearly, Sir, with the current scale of teachers in the school, we are afraid that it will be difficult to do it in a short period of time. In a territory with a population of 20,000, there are nearly 3,000 children eligible for admission. The current maximum teaching capacity of the primary teaching department can only absorb 50% of them. Reiner and Asdalen, the 2 alchemical life forms, are very accurate in their population statistics work, and the error is generally no more than double digits. In the pioneering territory with a population of 20,000, in addition to teenagers who are 16 years old and can participate in labor and work, there are indeed more than 3,000 children aged 8 to 16 who are eligible for education. However, The territory's only public school currently has fewer than 50 teachers across all its teaching departments. The primary school teachers alone, responsible for literacy and introductory instruction, account for more than half of this. They can barely manage 20 introductory classes, tending to fewer than 1,000 children. The head of the primary school department also spoke bluntly, "My lord, there are simply too many children. School is free, and the school provides a hearty, nutritious lunch. Almost every family with a formally employed adult would happily send their children to school. The existing teachers simply can't handle it, and there aren't enough classrooms, unless the Ministry of Education triples its staff and doubles the size of the public school," as Dallin replied meticulously. Harvey scratched his head in irritation. Where would he find more staff for the Ministry of Education? In this dark and benighted world, shrouded in religious beliefs and supernatural magic, and ruled by a feudal aristocracy, the per capita literacy rate is a pitiful 1%. In order to set up an education department and carry out modern universal education, he almost scoured the entire pioneering territory to gather this group of feudal intellectuals who could master basic literacy, grammar and arithmetic. For this purpose, he even lowered the recruitment requirements for teachers, and even recruited retired stonemasons who could carve words on stone tablets as teachers. He closed his eyes and thought for a moment, then said decisively, "Change the existing teaching model. I have a way to solve the problem of insufficient teachers. Let these children learn by themselves as much as possible. Self-study." "How is this possible?" "That's right, self-study. There will be an open class every day for primary education, teaching the most basic literacy and reading and writing. Textbooks and teaching materials printed by the Ministry of Education will be distributed uniformly for them to practice on their own. There is no need for junior teachers to keep a close eye on them all the time, and there are no mandatory requirements such as assessment tests." As Dallin was stunned and argued, the teaching effect may be very poor in this way, just like the nighttime adult literacy classes. With no one supervising and relying entirely on self-consciousness, it would be good if 1 out of 10 children can learn. Harvey chuckled and said lightly, "It doesn't matter. 1 is 1. It is better than the current situation where, due to lack of staff and limited enrollment, more than half of the children who can't read a single word are turned away. Free education at least gives them a chance." These children's parents, themselves adults working and living in the territory, understood better than anyone that a high-paying job required a certain level of education. Naturally, those who had already met their basic needs wouldn't sit idly by and watch their offspring end up in low-paying jobs. Starting today, the Ministry of Education will reenact the education system according to my plan. Harvey clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention back to him. Public schools will only offer 5 years of free education. The first 3 years will provide elementary education. After passing assessments, students will progress to secondary vocational education in the 4th year. After 2 years, they will graduate and be employed in various production departments. A small number of outstanding students will complete their secondary vocational education and, depending on their academic performance, will be admitted to the advanced teaching department. These young people will serve as reserve personnel for future territorial administration. "Lord, what about the Spellcaster Academy?" Dirt Holden, the dean of the Spellcaster Academy, which is affiliated with the Ministry of Education, asked quietly. Harvey glanced at the young dean and smiled. "I have additional arrangements for you. I'll discuss this with you privately later." Chapter 313, Building a Spellcaster Academy. Dirt, are the alchemy and magic apprentices in your Spellcaster Academy doing well? Harvey asked with a smile, sitting in the principal's office, holding a cup of hot tea. Dirt rubbed his hands awkwardly, his face filled with shame. "Sir, the Spellcaster Academy currently has only 76 alchemy and magic apprentices, divided among the 3 classes of alchemy, magic, and potions. Due to a shortage of magic teachers, Dirt, Chris, Igno, and I are currently teaching part-time. Less than a third of these apprentices are native to the Pioneer territory, a source of constant worry and frustration for Dirt. Normally, after initial education, at least 1 in 1,000 children should be selected for spellcasting talent. A principality like Jinhu City, with a population of over 30 to 50,000, and its surrounding towns, could easily fill a small Federation magic academy, producing hundreds of full-fledged spellcaster apprentices for the Federation. Yet, here in the northern wastelands, out of a population of over 20,000, there weren't even enough children to attend a 30-person magic initiation class. It couldn't be that there was something wrong with the physiques of these native wastelanders, since many of them were recent immigrants from the southern border. Could it be that my method of discovering and testing their spellcasting talent isn't correct? Dirt almost doubted his past experience. But this is the testing method the Federation has used for centuries, the mental and magical tolerance test. Harvey couldn't help but think back to his own childhood, when he received magical initiation from the palace's spellcasting advisor. At 8, talent could be tested using magic potions and a mental frequency coordinator. Once a child turned 15 and still couldn't tolerate the magic potions or activate mental frequency coordinator, it was essentially declared a lifetime of no chance for magic. Don't worry for now. The children of the Pioneer Territory have only just escaped poverty a few years ago. Many of them have generations of illiterate ancestors. It's difficult to immediately identify talented spellcasting apprentices among them, Harvey soothed gently. Dirt breathed a sigh of relief, then worriedly said, I originally thought the Spellcasting Academy would provide some apprentice trainees for the alchemy lab, the medical center, and the magic arsenal, which have always been short of magical talent. Who knows? He hesitated to bring it up. Currently, the magic arsenal often relied on the Lord Harvey to personally lead a group of high-ranking spellcasters in conducting repetitive tests that could easily be completed by magic apprentices when faced with experimental research and development. I have made arrangements in advance. Our own talent pool is not enough, so let's introduce talents from outside. Harvey did not feel discouraged, and said with a smile, I have sent letters to the dwarves and elves to invite them to send some young people with spellcasting talent from their respective tribes. We will provide them with magical enlightenment education, and they will work for the territory for 5 to 8 years as repayment. Dirt was stunned for a moment and almost jumped up in shock. My lord. Foreigners cannot learn human magical knowledge. This is a traditional rule established since the ancient Magic Council. Harvey rolled his eyes and said with some displeasure. Bullshit rule. Humans cannot take in half-elves at will. Look, isn't Egno staying well in the territory? Dirt, a former official member of the Federation, said in a trembling voice, the Federation may turn a blind eye because of your status as a collaborator, but if the Magic Council of the 7 Wizarding Nations knows about it, they can drown us with spit alone. Harvey waved his hand nonchalantly, saying, don't worry about that. I have my own solutions and coordination methods. You just need to prepare for now and make good arrangements for the upcoming group of foreign magic students, the Magic Council of the 7 Wizarding Nations. Many of their core, high-ranking members were still eagerly hoping to gain more points on my Magic Network Spellcaster Forum, recruit more members from their own faction, and reap greater benefits. Dirt pursed his lips, no longer trying to forcefully argue with the Lord about these ancient and backward traditional legacies. After all, he had been saved by the Lord, and the St. Valen branch of the Union had ceased to exist under the pressure of the Church and the nobility. Holding on to this powerful, high-ranking spellcaster who had a close relationship with his uncle was his greatest hope and help in his future advancement in magic. Then, how should I arrange these alien spellcasting apprentices? Didn't you divide them into 3 subjects, alchemy, spellcasting, and potions? Just test their respective talents in the same way as selecting human magic apprentices, and then divide them into classes. Dirt's mood calmed down a lot, and he couldn't help but burst out laughing. My lord, don't you know? The racial magic talent of the dwarves is limited to the scope of guiding, absorbing and casting earth element magic. The elves can only perceive the natural elements in the magic network. This is why we human spellcasters contemptuously call them magic dwarfs. As he spoke, he carefully looked at the door of the dean's office, fearing that he would be beaten up by the hybrid elf Egno if he was not careful. Huh? Is that so? Harvey scratched his head awkwardly. Back in my magic academy, I don't think I learned this kind of common sense about alien races. He felt a little embarrassed. After all, among the many spellcasting academies in the southern continent, the School of Necromancer was a typical fake school. Both the teaching quality and the faculty were sparse. Many advanced magical subjects weren't offered separately, focusing on a single, focused generalist teacher. But there are 2 separate subjects. Chris teaches the dwarven spellcasting apprentices, and Egno teaches the elven apprentices. Dirt said cautiously, Egno is a half-elf. Would he be reluctant to teach these elven apprentices who used to hate and despise his half-blood status? Harvey immediately recalled the moment he had rescued Egno, and how he often wore his hair down, carving to hide his missing pointed ears, and a sense of emotion welled up in his heart. Ah, that's a problem. It's really not easy to get him to repay kindness with resentment. I'll go and persuade him personally. If that doesn't work, I'll have Asdalin teach him personally. For him, these alien magic apprentices were more about establishing a close partnership with the elves and dwarves within the spellcaster forum, thereby balancing the current dominance of the Union faction within the forum. He also had the added benefit of gaining a pool of ready-made magic apprentices, providing 5 to 8 years of free labor for his own expansion. As for how far they would progress, and how much they could take back from him, it all depended on his mood and their subsequent performance. Chapter 314 Foreign Students. Steelmane, look at this city. It's so clean and new, even the streets are straight and flat. And the houses on both sides, Mother Earth, they're just like replicas from the same mold. A group of young burrowing dwarves walked the streets of the frontier territory, glancing around and exclaiming in amazement. The leading dwarf looked older, with a slightly bushy, curly beard growing on his chin, which seemed to be carefully groomed, giving it a shiny black appearance. The magical city of Alea that Lord Bronzehammer visited was probably even more prosperous and magnificent than this, right? The scale of human kingdoms and urban development is truly astonishing. Steelmane, the young leader of the group, couldn't help but sigh in admiration. He then stole a glance at the soldier leading the way in front, turned his head and whispered a reminder to his companions. Chief Nully and Lord Tongshu repeatedly reminded us before we set out that we must watch and learn more after we come here, and we must not be outdone by the apprentices sent by the elves. This is related to the reputation and glory of our tribe. The leading soldier led them forward for another distance, and soon arrived in front of a walled townhouse next to a street garden. The leading soldier smiled and waved his hand to signal them to come closer. Gentlemen, the soldier bowed cordially, addressing the southern visitors, who barely reached his chest but whose arms were thicker than his thighs. This is the territory's Spellcaster Academy. Someone will arrive shortly to greet you. We'll simply show you the way. The junior leader, Steelmane, smiled back politely. After a moment's thought, he pulled 2 shimmering, pale red gems from the dwarven leather bag at his waist. These were a specialty of the underground city, a highly sought-after decorative gem in the southern territories. While not priceless, they commanded considerable value. Thank you, sir, for guiding us. This small gift is a token of your gratitude. The leading soldier's expression suddenly changed. He straightened his back and said sternly, "What do you mean? I'm a professional soldier of the territory's People's Defense Force, not some shameless vassal guard of the southern nobles. We never accept bribes or gifts." "Take them." Steelmane froze, awkwardly standing there with the 2 gems clasped in his open palm. Another dwarf beside him quickly stepped forward, pulled back his raised arm, and pulled out a delicate tin wine flask from his backpack. With a smile, he said, "Apologies, sir. Please forgive our rudeness and impertinence, but please accept this small gift. This is a dwarven specialty, fermented rice wine. It's not a bribe or property, and it's harmless." The leading officer's expression softened considerably, but he still politely declined the dwarf's offer with a wave of his hand. The gates of the spellcasting academy behind him suddenly opened, and a hearty laugh reached the ears of everyone. "Ha ha ha, young guests, don't worry. Territory soldiers don't accept bribes and are strictly prohibited from drinking. Don't embarrass them." Steelmane turned and saw a young spellcaster, about 20 years old, dressed in a simple, short spellcasting robe, standing on the steps of the academy gate and smiling at everyone. "You are Chris Bird, head of the Territory Alchemy Laboratory and vice president of the Spellcaster Academy." Chris enthusiastically led the group of young cavern dwarves into the lobby of the academy's main building. After looking around, he asked in a gentle voice, "Did Cavern City just throw a bunch of young people like you here? There's not even an older leader." Steelmane shook his head a little awkwardly, then puffed out his chest and replied, "Mr. Bird, I am the leader. Well, the elves arrived earlier than you, and we've already arranged for them to stay in the apprentice dormitory. You will live with them later. The academy has just been established, so the accommodation conditions are a bit difficult." "I'm really sorry." The dwarves quickly waved their hands to indicate that it was okay. In the past, they had lived in dwarven arch houses that were half stone and half earth in the dungeon city. Even if the pioneering territory had not prepared accommodation for them in advance, it was completely acceptable for them to dig caves or build huts on a hillside outside the city. They always kept their tasks and missions in mind. They came here to learn the advanced magical knowledge of humans, not to enjoy themselves. Chris nodded, very satisfied with the attitude of these foreign students towards learning. He then took out a stack of small cards with exquisite and intricate patterns from his pocket, distributed them to everyone and reminded them, the Lord's pioneering territory does not allow outsiders to enter at will. If you want to move freely in the territory, you must always carry this certificate proving your identity. If you encounter a patrol police wearing a gray uniform and a strange metal baton on his waist, you must take the initiative to hand over your certificate for them to check. Don't conflict with them easily. He paused and gave an additional reminder, you can wander around the market area and the college area at will, but don't go to the industrial area, administrative area and military camp easily or stay for too long. The castle area where the Lord lives is not allowed to be entered without being summoned. Do you understand? Steelmane pinched a stack of hard paper in his hand, nodded subconsciously in a daze. I understand. Very good, then let me take you to the apprentice dormitory first. Chris turned and walked away. The young leader hurried over, gently tugging at his sleeve and anxiously demanding, Mr. Bird. When can we start learning magic? This was their sole purpose for coming. No matter how challenging the learning environment, no matter how disdainful or challenging the magic instructor, they wouldn't give up easily. After all, this precious opportunity was truly hard-won. What's the rush? Classes officially start next week. You still need to take a talent test and then be assigned to a subject. Chris gave a helpless smile, raised his hand, and summoned the academy staff responsible for receiving and placing these alien apprentices. They quickly dispatched them to the nearby apprentice dormitories. Mother Earth, the young dwarf stood at the entrance to his room on the second floor, clutching his newly received apprentice uniform, his eyes wide with shock. Was this what Mr. Bird was talking about, the accommodations being somewhat difficult? The spacious studio, over 20 square meters, had 2 exquisitely closed windows, each one tightly shut, preventing a single ray of wind or snow from entering. 2 high and low wooden beds were placed against the walls. These beds were covered with a cotton mattress and blanket that looked warm and soft. The pillows were bulging, seemingly filled with some fluffy stuffing. A thick fur blanket was thoughtfully draped over the headboard. No. It was much more than just a spacious room and a comfortable bed. A desk, large enough for 4 people to sit side by side without feeling crowded, sat by the window. The surface had clearly been meticulously polished and oiled, leaving no trace of roughness. 4 small lockers, each with a lock, sat beneath the desk. The staff member in charge of receiving and placing the trainees nudged the young dwarf, who was frozen at the doorway, afraid to enter. The dormitories are quite tight, so you, like the elven trainees, will have to stay in 4-person rooms for now. He pointed casually to a small, tightly closed room to the right of the entrance and patiently explained, each dormitory has its own bathroom. Remember to flush the toilet after use. Hot water is available at 6 in the morning and 9 at night, for an hour each. If you miss it, you'll have to wash and shower in ice-cold water. Don't forget, private bathroom, hot water, shower. Steelmane opened his mouth but found himself speechless. He could only watch, clutching his 2 rotating apprentice uniforms, as the dormitory manager turned and left to make arrangements for the rest of his tribe. Is this really for us? He walked over to the bunk bed and, under the watchful eyes of his companions, carefully sat down on the soft mattress. He reached out his rough hand and gently stroked the fur blanket. So soft, so warm. From the spacious corridor on the second floor, the dormitory manager's voice clapped and called out, "Students, after you've packed your bags, please take your students' IDs and go to the small building next door with the sign for the academy restaurant for dinner. If you're late, you'll have to eat bread in the dorms." Chapter 315, Trade Fair in the Wasteland. On a statutory holiday in the Frontier Territory, Harvey chose not to sleep in like most of the territory's residents. Instead, he struggled out of his soft, comfortable bed early. This was entirely due to his 2 subordinates, Chief Advisor Asdalin and City Manager Reiner, who possessed the magic power, innate worker's body. After all, as alchemical beings, they required no food or rest. When operating at full speed, they could handle in a single day the paperwork that would take ordinary territorial officials 2 or 3 days. Whenever Harvey tried to rest up or stay in bed, Asdalin would maintain his composure in the study, handling official business for him while he waited. Reiner, Harvey's longest-serving companion, would become restless. Every quarter hour, he would quietly inquire with the guards outside the bedroom or quietly enter the adjacent living room to keep watch. The main theme is a proactive leader who pushes the boundaries, while a boss who involuntarily becomes a boss. My lord, I still think this trade fair should be held only in Jackdaw Town or Grizzly Castle. Having those invited chambers of commerce come to our frontier territory always seems to cause trouble. After all, there are too many people and too many eyes. As Dallin has always been a firm believer in Harvey's concept of intellectual and technological property rights, he has always been wary and distrustful of any trade or cooperation between his territory and the Southern Territory Chamber of Commerce. No, let them come to the North Territory. Only by coming to the frontier territory and witnessing how we have built this wasteland into such prosperity in just a few years will they have confidence in our business partnerships and be willing to shell out the cash to sign large-scale trade orders. This is also a disguised form of flexing muscles, though it differs somewhat from the use of armed force for violent intimidation. Harvey yawned and gave instructions while enjoying a hearty breakfast. Each chamber of commerce will limit the number of people entering, issue them temporary passes, and can only operate within the designated venue in the market area of the territory during the entire trade fair. Spying on the opponent's business secrets and stealing product formulas are traditional means of commercial competition in this world. In comparison, engaging in price wars and secretly spreading negative news about competitors are considered routine operations that can be put on the table. Harvey once heard from his old friend Vice President Santos of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce in casual conversation that some chambers of commerce with royal or aristocratic backgrounds would even use force to forcibly attack the forces of their competitors in trade competition, and gain the upper hand by blocking trade routes and sealing up the warehouses of their workshops. Reiner nodded in agreement, adding, "Many of the people brought by the various chambers of commerce this time will undoubtedly have official connections with the southern kingdoms, and inevitably there will be spies from the nobles mixed in. I will specifically remind Superintendent Urio to deploy sufficient police forces to keep a close eye on these unruly speculators." Harvey wiped his mouth, clapped his hands, and chuckled. "Then, let's discuss and finalize the list of products to be displayed and promoted at this trade fair." 3 days later, on a morning after the heavy snow had cleared, the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce's caravan was the first to arrive at Harvey's northern frontier territory. Out of respect for his old friends and long-term partners, Harvey, for the first time, personally greeted them at the city gates. After a warm exchange of pleasantries, he ushered them inside and headed directly to the trade fair venue in the market district. The venue is a temporary arrangement made by connecting 3 vacant shops in the market district. The downstairs served as a display for the products, while the upstairs housed the lounge and meeting room for the visiting chambers of commerce. "Your Excellency Harvey, or, no, Lord Harvey. It's been a long time since we last met. The sudden outbreak of plague and war in St. Valen has truly delayed our cooperative trade, a significant loss for both of us." The pot-bellied Vice President Santos was delighted with Harvey's lavish reception, a treatment completely different from that of the other invited chambers. His slight dissatisfaction with Harvey's earlier proposal to bring in multiple chambers of commerce for competition and cooperation instantly vanished, and he smiled and took the initiative to introduce the heads of the other invited chambers of commerce. "My lord, this is President Andrew, an old friend of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce, and one of the leading mine owners and gem merchants in the Principality of Barclay. This is Mr. Morgan, the trade director of the Pharaoh's Royal Chamber of Commerce, who is mainly responsible for the land trade business of Erisburg." "Oh? The Pharaoh's Royal Chamber of Commerce?" Harvey asked curiously. "I heard that your Chamber of Commerce is the only organization in the southern continent that maintains good trade relations with the sea people all year round. I'm very curious about what kind of goods and commodities produced by us humans will be purchased by those alien races living on the reefs and in the Gulf streams of the archipelago." Director Morgan, who was tall, thin and gentle in appearance, bowed and then smiled and slowly explained, "Haha, most people in the world really don't know much about the sea people. Although they live in the sea half of their time, they still need to return to land for daily rest and reproduction. But there is no way to weave and farm on the reefs, so they lack a lot of cloth and fur. This has also been our main trade commodity with them." Andrew, the sturdy mine owner with a thick beard, also took the opportunity to speak. "Dear Lord, after Santos' introduction, we are very interested in the magic stone power machine you made. This time, it is all thanks to Santos' introduction that we have the honor to come to discuss with you the procurement cooperation of this alchemical equipment." Harvey smiled and said, "Don't worry, everyone. I have prepared many products with great commercial value for this commodity fair, not just the magic stone power machine. I suggest that you visit and understand them one by one first, and then sit down and discuss it slowly. After that, he clapped his hands and asked the attendants to uncover the goods covered with cloth in the exhibition hall, attracting the heads of the Chamber of Commerce in the southern region to gather around and look at them carefully. This is a high-quality liquor with a unique recipe. I've named it Icefield Vodka. Please try it and give us your feedback. Several merchants, clearly fond of alcohol, quickly took a small glass of liquor from the waiter's tray, brought it to their noses, sniffed it, then took a sip and closed their eyes to savor it. Wow! Such a strong liquor. I bet even Isengard, the cavalry kingdom known for its spirits, can't produce such a fiery and lingering wine. Yes, it's a rare and exquisitely crafted liquor. It's a pity that people here don't like spirits, preferring mellow, clear wine. I'm afraid this wine won't sell very well. Harvey didn't rush to explain, but leisurely waited for them to continue their discussion. A few minutes later, the faces of the merchants who had been drinking began to turn red, and beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. Then, some of them ignored their manners and unbuttoned the heavy fur coats they were wearing. However, they felt it was not enough, so they even unbuttoned several buttons of the formal suits underneath to let them hang open. This wine only requires such a small glass, yet it has such a fiery effect in dispelling cold. Harvey then smiled and said, "Yes, gentlemen, this is actually a finely brewed medicinal wine that can ward off cold and dampness. We added a magical herb during the brewing process, so that after drinking it, it not only can resist the cold weather, but also soothes the blood and veins in the body. For those who suffer from rheumatism and bone pain all year round, it is comparable to taking a special potion." Director Morgan said in surprise, "Your lord, arbitrarily mixing magical substances into civilian products this is expressly prohibited by the Federation." Harvey waved his hand to interrupt his confusion and explained, "The Federation stipulates that only magical substances that have been registered in the alchemy and potion codes are not allowed to be used by civilians. The ones used in this medicinal wine are special products of the northern wasteland, unique magical plants that have never been discovered and made public, so it is not prohibited." His argument, exploiting official loopholes, won the approval of the cunning merchants present, who nodded in approval. Director Morgan, who had first raised the question, had a glint of passion in his eyes. Warding off cold and dampness, stimulating menstrual blood flow, this was the most urgently needed medicinal product for the sea creatures, who lived year-round in the salty, cold waters and suffered from osteopathic pain. If they could secure the exclusive rights to Icefield Vodka, it would surely bring the Pharos Royal Chamber of Commerce even greater wealth than the overseas textile trade. Chapter 316, Popularization of Magic Technology for Civilians. Harvey then enthusiastically introduced several specialty products from the Northern Frontier Territory to the assembled Chamber of Commerce leaders. The fragrant medicated soaps, claimed to soothe and cure various skin ailments, and the exceptionally durable canned goods were met with widespread acclaim and widespread popularity. Several Chamber of Commerce leaders specializing in maritime trade were eager to try their luck, even asking to meet Harvey upstairs to discuss bulk purchases. "Everyone, please don't rush into making a decision. Wait until we've finished introducing all the products, and then we can discuss them." Harvey, already beaming with joy, maintained a calm demeanor, pressing his hand. "I can guarantee that these products, unique to the Frontier Territory, are unavailable anywhere else in the Southern Territory. We guarantee quality and are absolutely fair." He paused, then introduced a rubber fruit-coated fur garment, demonstrating its exceptional waterproof and moisture-proof properties, drawing admiration from the assembled Chamber of Commerce. After all the merchandise had been displayed and introduced, the Chamber of Commerce leaders gathered in small groups and began to discuss in low voices. Harvey didn't rush them, giving them ample time to consider. He then left the ground floor exhibition hall and headed to a second-floor lounge to wait. Soon, there was a gentle knock on the door, and guards ushered in Vice President Santos, Andrew, a jewel merchant and mine owner, and Mr. Morgan, the head of trade for the Royal Pharaoh's Chamber of Commerce. Harvey had a clue, realizing these three were trying to leverage the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce's strong partnership to establish a preemptive alliance and gain an advantage for future trade. "Your Excellency, I'm surprised that after over a year, your domain has produced so many novel and high-quality goods." Vice President Santos of the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce had always been courteous to Harvey, even when he was a solitary necromancer. His attitude had remained unchanged. The muscular Andrew was more direct. "Your Excellency, I've personally seen the alchemical instruments you manufacture at Santos's mine. They replace human labor in transporting ore and pumping water from the mine. They're as powerful as giants. With just a few cheap, low-level magic stones, they can work non-stop for most of the day. He rubbed his hands expectantly as he spoke. Please name your price. I certainly don't expect the same preferential treatment as Santos, but my sincerity is no less than his, Harvey explained with a smile. What I sell is not just a simple magic stone power machine. If you want to use it in your mine, you'll need to install a supporting track operation system. The instrument itself also requires regular maintenance and professional repairs. These follow-up services are all charged. Andrew raised his glass of ice-filled vodka to greet Harvey and said nonchalantly, "No problem at all. This is perfect for me. I plan to order 20 of these magic stone power machines from you, along with all the necessary supporting equipment and personnel. Just feel free to arrange." Tisk 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 tisk. It's true that birds of a feather flock together. A wealthy organization like the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce also introduces business partners who act like wealthy people. They dare to place orders without even agreeing on the price. For the sake of Vice President Santos, I originally sold the instruments and equipment at 20% off the original price, and now I'll give you a 15% discount. Harvey looked at Santos meaningfully. If this cooperation is a pleasure, next time you can enjoy the same discount treatment as the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce. Seeing that Andrew took the initiative and immediately got the benefits, Mr. Morgan, the trade director of the Pharaoh's Royal Chamber of Commerce, also hurried forward, bowed and said politely, "Your lord, we also want to purchase 10 magic stone power machines. At the same time, we hope to reach a long-term trade cooperation with you and purchase a large quantity of your ice-filled vodka." "I don't know the price," Harvey waved his hand and said generously. "You two were introduced by my old friend Vice President Santos personally. Naturally, you enjoy the same discount treatment. Any goods you buy from me will be more favorable than those gentlemen downstairs." This behavior immediately made Santos on the side feel that he was given enough face. His face flushed after just drinking, and he couldn't help laughing. Director Morgan then ordered a batch of medicated soap and canned goods. For a Royal Chamber of Commerce like theirs, which primarily focused on maritime trade, these goods were in high demand and would undoubtedly sell. Even if they had to be shipped thousands of miles from the northern border to the southern coast, the profit margin would be immense. Harvey ordered the pre-prepared contract and quickly signed it with the two wealthy individuals, concluding the partnership. He smiled as they carefully tucked the contract into their arms before leaving. In the spacious and luxurious lounge, besides Harvey and a few personal guards, Vice President Santos was the only one left. "My old friend, you don't seem particularly interested in the merchandise I just displayed this time." Santos shook his head. "No, I'm attracted to all of them. I'll just have my deputy finalize the purchase quantity. I know you'll never give me a bad price." This man was truly a cunning businessman. With his smooth talk, he inadvertently strengthened his relationship with Harvey. "Sir Harvey, when I arrived in the frontier territory, the magical alchemical carriage I rode, circled your territory's walls and passed over the glacial river. If my eyes hadn't been blurry, I'd have seen a strangely shaped vessel swiftly breaking through the ice on the mostly frozen river. It was made of steel, wasn't it?" Although the vice president appeared frank and honest, Harvey could detect a hint of trepidation in his tone and expression. Such a direct attempt to explore the secrets of a spellcaster's creations required considerable risk and courage. "My old friend, don't even think about getting that steel ship. It's a magical creation. I can't sell it to you for a price." Harvey rejected the other party's cautious proposal quite sincerely. Santos breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that he hadn't angered Harvey, and immediately changed his target. Then those alchemical instruments I saw when I came to the venue, which were ridden by people and could move quickly on the road just by pushing their legs, I think they were called bicycles, right?" Harvey smiled bitterly. "I guess selling this thing to you won't be very good. Besides here, where else in the southern part of the country can you find such smooth and orderly roads for these bicycles to travel smoothly and safely?" He pulled Santos to the window of the lounge and pointed at the civilians riding bicycles leisurely on the street outside. "This kind of human-powered vehicle has certain requirements for road conditions. Dirt roads and potholed cobblestones are easy to fall off, and they are not as practical as horses and carriages. I can give you a few of them as rare items to please those southern nobles, but forget about large orders." Santos squinted his eyes and looked out the window for a moment, then sighed with a sense of loss, and returned to sit down with Harvey dejectedly. For a Chamber of Commerce leader with a sharp eye and a keen sense of business, discovering an unprecedented new business opportunity but being unable to profit from it was really a bit of a blow to his mentality. Harvey chuckled at this and comforted him softly. "Don't be discouraged, my old friend. The people you brought with you have returned with a full load, so how could I let you go back empty-handed? This time I have prepared a good deal just for you." He clapped his hands, and two attendants pushed the door open and entered, holding a wooden tray with several ordinary-looking crystal glass bottles on it. "How about it? Are you interested in becoming my agent and distributor of civilian anti-epidemic drugs in the southern border? The kind with the sole exclusive sales rights." Chapter 317 Pharmaceutical Monopoly. Plague potions, malaria potions, smallpox potions, cold blight potions, bloodworm potions. George Santos, vice president of the Dragonstone Merchant Guild, stared at the neatly stacked tray of finger-sized crystal vials before him, stunned for a moment. True, these common plagues and intractable diseases in the mortal world could be cured with a high-level radiant divine arts of the Church's healing priests, but that was a privilege reserved for the nobility. Ordinary people were not worthy of the attention and favor of the god servants. Put another way, how could true nobility contract these filthy, incurable diseases? They traveled in convenient carriages, drank pure, sweet wine and spring water, and their castles and estates were kept immaculate by servants. They didn't risk being bitten or sickened by rats competing for territory, nor did they step into filthy waterways infested with bloodworms. Most of them were unlikely to come into contact with these infectious diseases in their lifetimes. Rest assured, these potions contain no magical substances prohibited by the Alchemical Codex. They are made of absolutely legal and natural ingredients. As long as you can withstand the accusations and pressure from the Church, I believe they will soon replace expensive divine remedies and become the best-selling cures. Purely natural ingredients. Could they be made from undiscovered herbs? Aren't these the witchcraft remedies venerated by rural witch doctors in the past? That would certainly face pressure and resistance from the Church. Those witch doctors without magical talent are much easier to bully than magicians. Santos's mind raced, and he carefully picked up a glass vial, examining it closely. "Sir Harvey, can the magical ingredients in these potions truly completely alleviate those highly contagious diseases? Could it be?" He suddenly remembered the plague that had recently broken out in the Principality of St. Valen. It had spread rapidly throughout the Principality, sending a large number of infected refugees fleeing. The surrounding nations were forced to blockade their borders with military forces to prevent the spread of the plague. But this seemingly unprovoked plague seemed to be suddenly and quietly contained, quickly quelling. Aside from the Church and the Union each claiming to possess a specific cure, the border region of Lord Harvey's duchy remained completely untouched by the disease. The shrewd vice president narrowed his eyes, feeling as if he had grasped the crux of the matter. This spellcasting pioneer lord had undoubtedly played an indispensable role in curbing the plague's spread. "Sir Harvey, if we can obtain written approval from the Union, our Dragonstone Merchant Guild is willing to assume exclusive rights to all pharmaceutical products, and become your sole distributor for pharmaceuticals in the Southern Territories." Even as Santos spoke, he could detect a faint tremor of excitement in his voice. This was a deal he had rarely encountered in his life. A miraculous potion that could cure a contagious disease considered incurable, and that could be manufactured and supplied in large quantities. He simply couldn't imagine the enormous profits his own Chamber of Commerce could reap. If it weren't for the family backing, the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce would have immediately become a thorn in the side of every Chamber of Commerce and Church in the southern region. Had it secured the exclusive rights and orders, and officially launched the potion, Santos's hands trembled as he accepted the business contract from Harvey. This was destined to be a sleepless night for most of those invited to the Frontier Territory Trade Fair. George Santos stood by the window of his third-floor hotel room, gazing at the desert city, still ablaze with lights amidst the deep night and biting snow. For merchants, the more bustling a place was after dark, the more prosperous and wealthy it was. The bright candlelight symbolized thriving commerce and endless wealth. But he had only witnessed this kind of city scene, lit up all night long, in a few places like the Magic City and the royal capital of Orland. And this vast frontier territory before him looked every bit as prosperous as those renowned metropolises of the Southern Territory. From the third floor of the hotel, the entire territory was practically ablaze with light. Buildings that looked like workshops glowed with blazing white lights, while the bustling shops and taverns along the street shone with golden glow. And the densely packed, seemingly identically modeled houses lit up with a soft, orange-yellow glow. Even the streets, lined with uniformly colored metal lampposts every 10 or so meters, topped with what seemed to be some kind of illuminating magic stone, provided pedestrians with lingering illumination throughout the night. What a luxury! Suddenly, a voice came from behind. The secret to keeping this room warm is actually in these copper pipes embedded in the wall. Wow, the pioneering territory established by the spellcaster is indeed full of magic and extraordinary things. Santos quickly turned around and bowed to a young man standing by the wall, observing the room but wearing the clothes of an ordinary Chamber of Commerce employee. He said, "President, it is said that these magical devices are not only in the hotels that receive guests and the lord's castles. They have covered the entire territory with this thing called a warm water system. Almost every household can enjoy the warmth in the room, and they don't even need to light a fireplace." The young man called the president waved his hand and asked in a low voice, "How do they achieve such an endless flow of hot water from that copper pipe in the bathroom?" The area around the hotel is full of patrol soldiers and guards arranged by this lord, so our people can't go out to explore or move around. But I asked someone and found out that the hot water seems to be flowing from those tall giant iron towers behind the house. Under the iron towers is an enclosed shed called the equipment room, and occasionally you can see large streams of scorching steam gushing out of it. The young president was silent for a moment and sighed softly. I originally thought that this lord was deliberately showing us his magical creations and inventions, but what we see and enjoy now are just the routine facilities that all ordinary civilians in this pioneering territory can use on a daily basis. He paused, walked to the window, and looked out at the lights of the entire city. Only a place like this can fully tap the potential of the people, make them willingly work and work tirelessly day and night to provide the wizard lord with an endless supply of wealth and resources. It's a shame. The foolish nobles and greedy rulers of the southern kingdoms will never realize this. They only cling to their tight grip on the land and food, forcing the ignorant masses to work the most menial labor in the fields, and then desperately squeeze out the meager taxes. Santos, standing behind him, cautiously suggested, "President, would you like me to introduce you to Lord Harvey in a formal, public capacity?" The young man narrowed his eyes and chuckled self-deprecatingly. "Not this time. We've taken such a huge advantage without providing equal value. Even if we met, we wouldn't be treated equally. It would be more appropriate to wait until the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce truly established this pharmaceutical business covering the southern border and brought them sufficient profits to satisfy him before making a formal visit. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, The Visitor is Looking for Someone. My lord, the head of the Harrowport Merchants Guild from the Duchy of Cornwall is outside the castle, requesting an audience with you. Today was the final day of the 3-day trade fair. Most of the participating guilds had secured satisfactory purchase orders and were gradually leaving the wasteland for the southern border. Even the Dragonstone Guild, which had just signed a pharmaceutical franchise agreement with Harvey, bid farewell to him early in the morning and departed the city. With the exception of the Harrowport Merchants Guild, Duncan, the high-level illusionist, was sitting on the sofa in the study, chatting cheerfully with Harvey. He slowly retrieved his recently removed alchemical prosthetic arm from the coffee table and expertly reattached it. "My lord, this is the guild that Melissa and Jin have been closely monitoring, discovering a spellcaster hidden within the caravan." Harvey nodded. He had received detailed intelligence from the Eye of Illusion and the astrologer on the very first day these guilds arrived in the frontier territory. Most of the guilds did indeed contain bloodline warriors possessing extraordinary powers. This was perfectly normal, given that these were the leaders of the major guilds of the southern territory. While they had the Dragonstone Guild as a credible introduction, they also had to ensure their own personal safety. However, the situation at the Harrowport Guild was unique. They had 2 spellcasters masquerading as ordinary servants and staff hidden within their ranks. While the Eye of Illusion couldn't pinpoint them from a distance, judging by the strength of their magical fluctuations, they were at least mid-level spellcasters. It's not uncommon for a guild to employ spellcasters as advisors and bodyguards, but the fact that a small, obscure guild could plant 2 mid-level or higher spellcasters in a caravan, acting covertly and unaware of their presence, is highly suspicious. "Here, leader of the Harlow Guild, are you seeking an audience alone, or with an attendant?" "Your Excellency, You brought 2 attendants, and none of them were armed, Duncan chuckled. How audacious they are. Don't they know this is spellcaster territory? They dare to come so rudely and demand an audience with 2 mid-level spellcasters. 4 spellcasters of the same rank. Visiting a local indigenous magician is traditionally required to follow ancient wizard etiquette, reveal your identity and present your magical seal as a visiting card in advance. Only after receiving a reply from the host can you politely pay your respects. Otherwise, such a stealthy act of infiltrating into the host's lair is tantamount to an open provocation and a grave insult to the Lord. The Eye of Illusion politely pushed open the door of the study, bowed to Lord Harvey and Teacher Duncan, and asked, "My lord, teacher, Melissa and I are in the hall on the 1st floor. Do you need us to drive them away directly? Or, cooperate with the Lord's blood warriors to capture them and torture them?" Duncan pushed himself up with one hand, and his heavy metal body slowly stood up from the sofa. He put his palm on his chest and bowed to Harvey, saying, "My lord, the other party's provocation is so rude that it is not worth your personal response. Why don't you let Melissa and I go down and teach them a lesson directly? How about detaining them first and let them listen to your disposal?" Harvey quickly waved his hands and shook his head. He didn't dare let this master of illusion, who had undergone an alchemical prosthetic transplant surgery, to act for him. This was in his lord's castle. If a master of illusion with a body of steel cast a spell, he might be able to poke a big hole in the ceiling of the castle. No need, Mr. Duncan. I've never cared about those ancient, traditional formalities. Since they've been under our strict surveillance and haven't committed any misconduct in the past few days. They're all my invited Chamber of Commerce partners, so I owe them some respect. Since they need to see me individually, let's go down and meet them together. Mr. Reynolds, the other chambers of commerce have all left after the exhibition. I wonder what brings you here to see me, Harvey asked leisurely, teacup in hand, seated at the upper end of the castle's reception room. Flanked by 2 high-ranking figures, the Eye of Illusion and the astrologer, their teacher, Duncan, sat in a chair to the left, lower down. He turned his head toward Harvey with a hint of disdain, and gave the 3 visitors in the hall a cold look. Bloodline warriors, wielding their magic spears, lined up in rows on either side of the castle's reception room, their gazes fixed on the visitors, revealing undisguised hostility and wariness. Reynolds, the leader of the Harrowport Chamber of Commerce, looked pale. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He bowed his head and saluted Harvey, then said tremblingly, "My lord, please forgive our intrusion and rudeness. It's really a request. I want to find someone in your territory." "Oh," Harvey narrowed his eyes, a little surprised. "You're coming here for business is secondary. Your real purpose is to find someone." His mind raced, thinking carefully about how he had taken in most of the refugees from the wasteland since he moved to the wasteland. Aside from the slightly more sensitive hybrid Elfegno, there wasn't anyone else worth traveling so far to find. Could it be that some person of high status had inadvertently found refuge in his territory among the southern refugees? Who are you looking for? What is his specific identity? How did he come to my territory? What's his name? Harvey's continuous questioning made the already frightened Reynolds even more panicked. He tremblingly took out a letter with a seal from his arms, handed it to a guard, and explained in a low voice, please forgive me, my lord, I don't know the real name of that person at all. The gentleman who entrusted me to find that person only gave me a strange magic letter and told me that only by finding that person, and having him personally crack the secret on the letter, can I see the content of the letter." Captain Tommy of the guards took the letter and was about to bow and hand the letter to Lord Harvey, but when he heard the other party say that this was a magic letter with a secret seal, he was worried that there was some strange trap hidden in it. He immediately widened his eyes and used his bloodline talent weakness insight to check the thin envelope back and forth several times, like a human security machine. Harvey spoke up, "With all due respect, your chances of finding your target in my territory with just a letter and an unknown client are slim. There are over 20,000 people living here. I can't expect them all to abandon their daily work and production tasks to come and test this secret covenant." While this statement was meant to be a refusal of assistance, it was also a frank and respectful gesture, leaving Guildmaster Reynolds speechless. One of the 2 men who had been standing silently behind him finally lost control and stepped forward. "Your Excellency, the person we're looking for is a necromancer who has been living in hiding on the borders of St. Valen. Given the discrimination and unfair treatment you orthodox spellcasters have shown this faction, He's unlikely to reveal his identity and live openly here. So, please allow us free access to your territory to search for him." Huh? A necromancer? Living near Jackdaw Town? Unwilling to reveal his identity? As far as he knew, in the entire Grizzly territory, besides Mage Anthony, who had long since left for Danius, there were 2 other officially registered members of the Union, drafted to serve in the Evil Moon Mountains during the first invasion of the demonic orcs. How could he not know that the border region where he had lived and managed for 3 or 4 years was home to a mysterious necromancer? Chapter 319, Long-Lost News from an Old Friend. You can freely enter and exit the Lord's fiefdom, and yet you're asked to dig deep underground to find a necromancer you've never even seen. Duncan finally lost his temper and snorted coldly. Even if someone from the Union came, they wouldn't dare make such an outrageous and rude request to the Lord. He stood up and shook off his wizard robe. Pointing with one hand at the 2 people standing behind Reynolds, the leader of the Harrow Chamber of Commerce, he said contemptuously, "2 fellow magical practitioners, there's no need to be so secretive. I demand that you give the Lord the respect he deserves, otherwise." The other person, who had been silent all this time, finally stepped forward, bowed slightly, and gave an ancient wizard's salute. He said lightly, "There's no need for Mr. Advisor to be so angry. Please forgive us, Lord, for concealing our identities. After all, as my companion said, Orthodox spellcasters have never been very friendly to us necromancers. To avoid unnecessary conflict and trouble, we have no choice but to do this." He pointed at his companion and introduced, "This is Mr. White, and I, please call me Black." Harvey narrowed his eyes, a sigh of relief rising within him. This was the first time he had met his fellow spellcasters face to face in the outside world since graduating from the Necromancer Academy. Given the sparseness of the undead caster faction, this meeting was somewhat meaningful. "That's all right," Harvey waved, signaling Duncan to stop defending the 3 visitors. "In my domain, there's no discrimination against any particular caste. You may be free to reveal your identities." He paused, still perplexed, and asked, "But I've never heard of that anonymous necromancer you mentioned. Perhaps he's long since left this place and gone into seclusion elsewhere." Despite this, Harvey politely accepted the magical letter presented by Captain Tommy and glanced at the magical pact emblem affixed to the seal. This. Harvey straightened up, leaned in to examine it again, and finally, with a hint of excitement, stood up. "Wait. I know who you're looking for this time." He descended the stairs, stammered a hand to stop the 2 necromancers from eagerly asking questions, and said in a deep voice, "Please stay here and rest for a while. Mr. Duncan, please help me greet these 3 guests." With that, he hurried to the castle's 2nd-floor study, leaving everyone in the hall looking at each other in confusion. Returning to the study and ordering the door to be closed, Harvey, a smile on his face, pulled a folder from his desk drawer and pulled out several already opened letters. He carefully compared the seals and emblems attached to them with the secret letter under the lamp. "That Ash Lambert. I thought he'd met with misfortune on the demon battlefield, but I didn't expect he's still alive." Harvey's last correspondence with his close friend from their college days was just as he was about to leave Jackdaw Town for the Mage ruins in the northern wastes. Lambert's final reply mentioned that, for some reason, he would soon depart for the Evil Moon Mountains to join the Mage Corps for 3 years of service. Unexpectedly, he never heard from him again. Harvey sent him several more letters using the messenger's location, but they all fell flat on their faces. As a classmate and roommate for nearly 5 years, Harvey was well aware of Lambert's spellcasting prowess and ability level. If he hadn't relied on the various necromancy artifacts his family had equipped him with, and the 3-generation-old stitched corpse puppet, Harvey could have easily defeated him in a one-on-one duel using his common magic and the time it takes to finish a meal. Ash Lambert was a typical 2nd-generation good-for-nothing lawyer. Besides his good character and gentle disposition, his generosity and disregard for money were perhaps the only qualities that attracted Harvey to his friendship. He served for 3 years, then suddenly vanished, and now he's reappearing to contact me secretly. Harvey slapped his forehead, his answer instantly dawning on him. This audacious fellow was definitely a draft dodger. He took the letter and touched the magical seal on the seal. He immediately sensed the decryption code and couldn't help but grin. This idiot Lambert still loved playing the code game that long since tired of playing back in college. Breaking the code was a piece of cake for Harvey. All he had to do within the few seconds it activated was shout out the secret nicknames his classmates had secretly given each other back in college to prevent the letter from being incinerated by the magic. Legendary idea, King. Harvey whispered his decryption code and rubbed his face in embarrassment. But it was still much better than the super ATM he'd taken out for Lambert. Unfolding the letter impatiently, Harvey saw the familiar, messy handwriting. My dear Harvey, forgive me for my long absence. Those days in Black Rock City were truly too hard. The Union scoundrels constantly targeted and harassed me. Many times while on missions, I felt a chill down my spine, like I was being watched, a terrifying feeling. At the time, I figured that if I died accidentally, the fatal spell wouldn't have struck my body directly, so I had no choice but to flee. Damn it, family reputation, personal honor, nothing matters more than my own life. By the time you read this letter, you've probably met my two companions. Mr. White and Mr. Black, right? There's no need to be distant with them. They grew up with me, close brothers. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared ask them to search for you on my behalf. Harvey, listen to me. Right now, across the entire southern border, both the legitimate spellcasting organizations and the abominable church clerics have begun a covert or overt purge of us undead spellcasters. These hypocritical individuals, seeking fame, are blaming us for the spread of the plague and spreading it everywhere. Even my family's ancestral home in days has been attacked by unidentified spellcasters. White and Black are secretly traveling to St. Valen to retrieve several fellow mages hiding in the country, and also to ask them to keep you informed. After all, you're not well informed in the borderlands, and I dare not easily reveal my real-world location to communicate with you. 1,000 words condense into one piece of advice. The southern kingdoms are no longer places to stay. If you don't have a reliable place to go, please accompany my two relatives. Be sure to conceal your identity along the way. I'll wait for you to reunite in a safe place. Harvey breathed a sigh of relief, a faint warmth welling up in his heart. Lambert, who had dodged military service and fled with his entire family for refuge, still remembered his old classmate hiding on the border of St. Valen, willingly risking exposure and getting into trouble to have someone come along and help him out. This friend might not be very good, but he was truly worth making friends with. Chapter 320 Witness of Friendship. Are you the one Lambert is looking for? The necromancer living in seclusion on the borders of St. Valen, Black and White, having been invited alone to the castle's study, exchanged a look of surprise and uncertainty. When they had followed the Harlow Chamber of Commerce into the wasteland, they had indeed heard that the owner of this pioneer territory was a spellcaster, a fiefdom lord of higher rank. Subsequent observations over the past few days had also revealed the presence of numerous spellcasters and apprentices within the territory. This was clearly the thriving ancestral home of an ancient wizarding family, managed for generations, though its location was somewhat secluded and low-key. Harvey generously displayed the letter emblem he had received to his two fellow necromancers. We lost contact shortly after Lambert left for the Evil Moon Mountains. We had been in frequent contact before that. White chuckled bitterly. How rude. Lambert seems to have underestimated your family background and personal strength. He actually asked us to find you and take you there while ensuring your safety. Forget about anything else. The Lord's magical advisors alone made no secret of their identities as high-level spellcasters, most likely powerful combat mages. It was as absurd as asking two mice to come all the way to protect a few lions. Blake, clearly a straightforward person, asked in confusion, but Lambert explicitly told me the friend he was looking for was a necromancer. But you? I'm sorry, I can't even detect a trace of emanating death magic from you. That's because I'm not doing my job properly, Harvey muttered silently. Haha, don't doubt me, you two. Because I practice multiple spellcasting schools, I can't strictly be considered a pure necromancer. However, the friendship between Mr. Lambert and I, classmates for many years, is truly undeniable. Practicing multiple arts, he commands high-level spellcasters, and he also owns a prosperous and thriving frontier domain. It's said that this lord also maintains a large private army. Just the bloodline warriors guarding the hall just now demonstrate his strength. It seems the other party's true identity must be a rare genius being trained as the successor of some secretive ancient wizard family. At this thought, the two necromancers almost simultaneously thought, fortunately, they hadn't committed any inappropriate or offensive acts on the other party's territory these past few days, otherwise they would have been hard-pressed to escape unscathed. Your lord, since everything is caused by Lambert's imagination, our visit this time has become a complete misunderstanding. In addition to expressing our sincere apologies, We will leave your territory immediately and will not cause you any extra trouble." Harvey waved his hand and said, "Wait. I think you two can't leave me for the time being." Blake's heart tightened, and the palms hidden in his robe sleeves clenched into fists unconsciously. He said nervously, "Your lord, based on the friendship between you and Lambert, can't you forgive us for hiding our identities and sneaking into your territory this time?" These people who came from ancient wizard families did attach great importance to wizard traditions and rules and etiquette. They probably regarded the behavior of the two of them sneaking into their territory as a more serious offense and insult. The two exchanged glances, their brains racing to think about how to get away safely. 4 bloodline warriors stood guard against the wall in the study, their gazes fixed on them. Outside the door, the undisguised magical pressure of a high-ranking spellcaster could be clearly felt. Downstairs, the magical advisor, Mr. Duncan, leisurely sipping tea, must have been closely watching the two's private meeting with the Lord. Harvey paused for a moment before realizing he'd misunderstood. He quickly explained, No. I'm not intending to detain you or punish you with force, ha. I'm asking you to stay with me for a few days while I prepare a gift for Lambert, and then take my reply with you. That isn't too much of a burden, is it?" Now it was the two necromancers' turn to be stunned. Okay, we'll be happy to deliver the gift for Lambert and the reply." After nightfall, Harvey dragged Asdalin and Chris into the castle's underground laboratory to tinker. "Sir, what exactly is this gift prepared for your classmate?" Chris, wearing a full-face protective mask, wielded a magic welding torch made entirely of mithril, carefully engraving magical runes onto a large rectangular wooden box. Asdalin, head bent over a metal lab table, rapidly assembling something, but his voice was busy. "Sir, it's obvious that you're asking us to divide the work and each complete a part of the gift." "Chris, I think you're making the gift box." Harvey suppressed a laugh and offered no explanation, but Chris froze for a moment, then lifted his mask and asked in surprise, "Sir, is Mr. Asdalin right? A gift box this large? What's going to fit inside it?" It certainly wasn't some powerful and strange magical weapon. After all, the packaging specifications didn't make sense. If it was such a large magical weapon, only dragons and giants could handle it. Besides, if it was just a gift, why would the box be engraved with runes? It wasn't like the magical weapon inside would become a spirit and escape on its own. "Wait. It's become a spirit." Chris slapped his forehead suddenly and said proudly, "My lord. I think I guessed what the gift you are going to give is." Asdalin stood up in confusion and looked at Chris like a fool. "What's so hard to guess? Such a big box must be filled with a magic car that can be disassembled and assembled. Did my lord say that his close friend is currently suffering political persecution and is on the run? Sending a lightning-fast magic car is like timely help." Harvey spit out the hot tea that he had just drunk. Chris shook his head confidently and retorted, No. If the magic car wants to keep running, it must use our unique liquid magic energy. Unless my lord continues to send it energy, otherwise people can only watch this heavy alchemical vehicle lying there." He chuckled, leaning closer to Harvey and saying proudly, "Sir, since your friend is a necromancer, I imagine you're planning to give him a fused undead alchemical puppet, a combination of a stitched corpse puppet and an alchemical prosthetic body." Harvey narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Chris is quicker than that, but you only got half the idea right. The gift he had prepared for Lambert wasn't just an undead alchemical puppet. But he was certain that when Lambert received this meticulously prepared gift, his jaw would drop to the ground in amazement." Chapter 321 Dark Sea. 5 days later, at the port of Erisburg, the capital of Pharos, the land of 1,000 sails, the undead spellcasters Black and White stood side by side aboard a multi-masted sailing ship about to set sail, watching closely as a merchant clerk carefully hoisted a massive rectangular wooden box, reinforced 3 times with planks and iron bars, onto the lower deck of the ship. White touched the thin letter he had been carefully cradling in his arms, sighed, and asked his companion, "What kind of gift do you think this mage lord has prepared for that Lambert?" It was truly a gift. Both in terms of meaning and appearance, it was incredibly grand. They had originally assumed it was merely a token courtesy to a former academy colleague, a token gift of appropriate status accompanied by a reply letter, a gift exchanged between spellcasters without any ulterior motive, perhaps a finely crafted mage robe, a historical tome of some research value, or simply a collectible devoid of any magical substance. "I don't know." Blake shook his head, indicating he had no idea. He subconsciously touched the magic pouch in his arms, This mage lord was truly generous. He felt it would be a bit of a hassle to ask the two of them to help deliver this large gift, so he actually gave him and White a small bag of high-quality shadow stones each. These were shadow stones, not those common elemental stones sold exclusively by the Union. The reason the undead casters were so unconventional was that they couldn't directly draw elemental and pure magic from common elemental and charged stones. Regardless of any type of magic stone, they needed to meditate and utilize the extra-dimensional properties of the magic network to transform the magic before they could use it. Except for shadow stones. Although shadow stones themselves contain dark matter magic, they were of the same origin as the death magic required by undead casters, and could be absorbed directly without the need for meditation. Unfortunately, this type of magic stone has always been scarce in the southern border, and due to its limited use, it has never been officially circulated in large quantities, only occasionally traded on the black market. White, we were originally sent by Lambert to rescue someone this time, but we didn't expect to get such a great deal, Black said, his face turning more and more pleased. 10 full shadow magic stones. I've been busy all year and haven't seen so many on the black market, White chuckled. That's not even a big deal. By helping this lord deliver the gift, we can even use his connections to borrow the continental teleportation array set up by the Federation in Jackdaw Town. Humph, those scornful people, who always looked down on us, immediately wagged their tails and prepared the teleportation ceremony for us after seeing the lord's magic emblem. How satisfying. Harvey worried that they might expose their identities and bring danger along the way, carrying a massive gift box and attempting to smuggle them to their hidden refuge. So, with a wave of his hand, he decided to send them directly from St. Valen to DOS, using the continental teleportation array the Union had restored in Jackdaw Town. They would then travel non-stop to the Principality of Pharos, and finally to Erisburg, the capital of Pharos, from where they could sail back to their refuge via sea. For the next 2 days, the multi-masted sailboat carrying White, Black, and the others sped along the seas away from the mainland, clearly a magical sailboat enchanted with a special runic array. A constantly active magic array was secretly placed beneath the ship's cabin, not only dispelling sea monsters through a unique magical wave but also somewhat accelerating the ship's speed. This trip also brought back a number of undead apprentices who had been stranded in Dalius and St. Valen. These apprentices, with their low magical abilities and ranks, would have been quickly captured by the Church and certain orthodox spellcasting organizations if they had remained in the southern kingdoms. They would have been either secretly imprisoned or publicly burned at the stake, a fate that would have been disastrous. After sailing eastward for hundreds of miles along the continental sea route, they suddenly reached a perilous area shrouded in perpetual fog, where terrifying reefs frequently appeared. The ship didn't turn around, but plunged directly into this misty sea, a place no sailor would dare venture into. Standing at the bow, Blake, using his telescope, carefully surveyed the foggy surface. He spotted a rocky beach where several mermen, with human bodies and fishtails, and sharp mouths and fangs, scrambled atop the rocks, humming softly. White pulled a brilliant white human bone, densely streaked with dark patterns, from his pocket, broke it, and tossed it toward the merpeople. As soon as it hit the water, it hissed and corroded, then erupted in a cloud of smoke, forming a strange emblem on the surface. The merpeople immediately noticed the movement aboard the sailboat, but for the first time ever, they didn't flee in panic. Instead, they stared blankly at the floating emblem for a moment before swimming closer to the sailboat, babbling at Black and White, who stood at the bow. The merpeople then formed a group, leading the sailboat, which was following closely behind them, into the dense fog shrouded by reefs. This was the secret refuge that Ash Lambert's necromancer family, along with several other closely allied undead spellcasting organizations in the southern kingdoms, had prepared for themselves. No one could have guessed that the Sea Clan, who had always refrained from deep interaction with any intelligent race on the continent, had, for unknown reasons, secretly formed a partnership with a faction of human undead spellcasters centuries ago. This was the primary reason the undead spellcasters, led by the Lambert family, could decisively and secretly relocate their entire clan when they sensed growing discontent within the magical world and the southern kingdoms. With the guidance and assistance of these half-blooded sea creatures, we only need another half a day to reach the center of the Dark Sea. White instructed the helmsman of the family chamber of commerce to closely monitor the direction indicated by the mermaids ahead. He and Black leisurely leaned against a mast. Once they entered the misty sea, they were essentially safe, no longer having to worry about their identities being exposed or the church's pursuit. Blake sighed. Although this place is safe and secluded, it's certainly not a comfortable place to live. Being so far away from human lands means it's harder to obtain corpses for magical research. Living under someone else's roof, we can't use the bodies of the sea creatures without permission. Alice, if only we were as powerful as that wasteland wizard lord. Perhaps we wouldn't have to hide like rats in the gutter. He's a genius from a prominent wizard family, but he's only practicing necromancy for some unknown hobby. How can we compare to him? White patted his companion's shoulder comfortingly, feeling a pang of regret himself. Even so, Blake muttered softly, if that's the case, then I might as well offer my services. Perhaps that gentle and approachable lord would be willing to hire me as his necromancy consultant. As the two chatted, an undead apprentice stumbled out of the cabin. Mr. White. Mr. Black. That big box at the bottom of the cabin, engraved with strange magical inscriptions, it suddenly came out with a noise. Chapter 322, the old classmate who emerged from the coffin. That large wooden box covered in strange magical runes, was there movement coming from inside? Black and White exchanged glances and asked in unison, could that be a corpse puppet given to Lambert by the Lord? But whether it was a zombie, a skeleton, or a disembodied spirit, without the magical manipulation of an undead spellcaster, it wouldn't react. How could it possibly be moving? White hesitated for a moment and suggested, how about opening the box and checking it? We will arrive soon. What if something goes wrong? But Blake shook his head decisively and said, no. Don't you understand? The densely packed inscriptions engraved on the box must be used to seal the thing inside. Besides, since they trust us to escort them, they must have hidden some kind of magical secret in the container. It is easy for something to go wrong if we open the box rashly. The best way is to ignore it completely and safely deliver the other party's reply letter and gift to Lambert. As for whether there will be any accidents later, that is Lambert's own responsibility. It has nothing to do with their delivery. Have all apprentices clear of the lower deck. Ignore that strange wooden box. You still have much to learn and experience, but you must understand, sometimes excessive curiosity can bring fatal danger. Guided by the half-blood mermaid, the multi-masted sailboat quickly broke through the fog and docked at a reef covered with fine black sand and gravel, dropping anchor at a simple, makeshift shallow water dock. Before Black and White even disembarked, they could already discern several figures in black spellcasting robes standing on the foggy dock. One of them seemed to be standing on tiptoe, peering towards the ship. White. Black. God of the dead, you finally returned safely. A tall young man with beautiful short golden hair, pale skin, and a pale figure called out to the two of them loudly, and walked quickly to the sampan where the passengers were disembarking. He frowned and looked around at the people who were getting off the boat one after another. He said with a lost expression, you didn't find my friend? Or did he have an accident? White had a strange look on his face. He avoided the other people on the dock and pulled him aside. Lambert, I'm not saying anything bad about you, but your ability to judge people is really terrible. You haven't figured out the true background and identity of the friend you entrusted us to find. He still had the nerve to say that he had been in the same class for several years and had a deep friendship. He was being played a pig and eaten the tiger, but he was still stupid and unaware. Real identity? Lambert was confused and muttered, Harvey's real identity? Isn't he from a small landlord family in Jinhu City that has fallen on hard times? He even paid for his tuition at the Undead Academy by selling half of his property and taking out a loan from the academy, and during this period he relied on part-time work and study to barely make it to graduation. Blake also came over and sneered. I guess he didn't want to expose his noble family background, so he just found an ordinary background as an excuse to condescend to make friends with you. As he spoke, he pulled out the reply letter from Harvey from his arms, stuffed it into the hands of Lambert who was stunned, and patted him on the shoulder. This time you asked us to find someone, but you made us look bad. Think carefully about how to compensate us later. White smiled and said, by the way, that gentleman also asked us to bring you a return gift. You kid really made friends with a noble person. He turned and pointed at the huge long wooden box that was being lifted by the crew with ropes and slowly lowered to the unloading area of the dock, and warned, although I don't think that gentleman would set a trap for you, this gift is a bit strange. You'd better be careful with it. Lambert's mind was in a mess. Harvey gave me a return gift? Such a big box, what's in it? He didn't bother opening the letter first. He quickly walked over to the massive wooden crate sitting quietly in the loading dock. He touched the magical insignia carved into its surface and exclaimed, "Harvey has struck it rich." The crate was crafted from the heartwood of the boneyard's ebony wood, used to store spell materials rich in death magic, effectively preventing the magical power from dissipating over time. Although Lambert came from a family of unpopular necromancers, their wealth was considerable, and they even had a palm-sized ebony wood storage box in their personal collection. What a lavish purchase, Harvey! This coffin-sized ebony wood box alone was worth a fortune, and it wasn't something you could simply buy with money. White and black, descendants of a branch of the family, lacked the foresight and insight of Lambert, the good-for-nothing eldest son of the headmaster. Hearing him identify the box's material so easily, they too, momentarily skeptical, approached. "Really, burial ground wood? Wow! We didn't even recognize it. No wonder it's inscribed with so many magical runes." Lambert scratched his head, puzzled. "But, what did Harvey mean by giving me a box? I don't have many precious magical materials to store or preserve, do I?" No, Black and white said in unison. "The box is just the outer packaging for your return gift. The real gift is inside." This gentleman actually used sullen wood for the gift box. "It's truly extravagant." Lambert froze for a moment, and before he could register the meaning of their words, a loud knocking sound emanated from the box. Boom! The onlookers' hearts skipped a beat, and they fell silent. "How about, why don't you open it now?" Blake suggested cautiously. "Perhaps it's a specially crafted corpse puppet, infected by the death magic contained in the gloomy wooden box, and inevitably undergoing some abnormal changes." This speculation was reasonable, and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They were all experienced in handling corpses, and the occasional corpse puppet mutation or zombie rampage was not surprising. Lambert nodded, released his mage's hand, approached the gloomy wooden box, and directly pulled out the cork wedges at the seal. It seemed that Harvey hadn't placed anything dangerous in the box, otherwise he wouldn't have sealed it so simply, not even bothering to use enchanted coffin nails. The lid of the box was carefully lifted and set aside, and the contents were immediately revealed. Someone exclaimed, "It really is a dark wood coffin." A pale, slender young man, dressed in a rich black mage robe embroidered with intricate gold threads, lay with his eyes closed inside the box, his body clearly covered with a thick, soft cotton pad. A terrifying thought flashed through Blake's mind, and he trembled. Is this a zombie created by a spellcaster? Lambert didn't dare to respond. He swallowed hard, frozen in confusion. White suggested cautiously, "Or, let's close the coffin, the lid, and carry it all back to camp. Let the mentor and the clan leader see it." Before he could finish his words, the young man's corpse in the box suddenly opened its eyes. It took only a few seconds for the corpse's eyes to shift from a stagnant state to a lively state. It glanced around at the people gathered outside the coffin, then locked eyes with Lambert, who looked terrified. Its lips moved as it began to speak. "Lambert. It's so good to see you again." Chapter 323, The Necromancer. Lambert practically fell to the ground in shock. In his panic, he suddenly realized the voice sounded familiar. He instinctively asked, Is it Harvey? Is it Harvey?" Harvey, controlling the spirit puppet, clung stiffly to the edge of the box, struggling to climb out of the coffin. He stretched his arms and legs, barely able to stand. "Yes, it was me. I'm sorry to have scared you all. I clearly explained the situation in my reply to you. It seems that you chose to open the gift first and then read the letter. Haha, you are still the same impatient person." Lambert got up from the ground with a red face, shook off his robe that was stained with fine black sand, and said in disbelief, "How did you become like this? I couldn't recognize you." Harvey laughed and took the initiative to walk forward and gave the stiff Lambert a big hug, explaining in a gentle voice, "This is just a puppet body that temporarily accommodates my consciousness and mental power. Please forgive me for not being able to tell you the secrets in it. In short, I have spent a lot of energy to come to see you in person." Lambert was skeptical and muttered softly, "You? Tell me what bullshit nickname you gave me when we were studying in college." Harvey rolled his eyes and shouted, "MR. Super ATM. ATM. Are you satisfied?" When Lambert shouted the first half of the sentence, he immediately rushed up and covered Harvey's mouth, saying repeatedly, all right. I believe you are Harvey. Stop talking. We have only just moved here a few months ago. If we hadn't used ships to transport some zombies and corpse puppets, I'm afraid we wouldn't even be able to build a temporary camp right now. As Lambert led Harvey to the depths of the island reef land, he chattered to Harvey about the situation here. This area, called the Dark Sea, is hundreds of miles in radius. The sea surface is shrouded in thick fog all year round due to the underground volcanoes. It is a place that sea merchant caravans and sailors avoid. A small group of more than 1,000 sea people live here all year round, and most of them are mixed-blooded. Since the Dragon Wars, the sea tribes have signed a peace treaty with the humans and other intelligent land races. They have strictly adhered to the treaty's terms, refraining from frequent incursions into the coastal areas of the southern continent. They have also become more tolerant of sailors who frequently wander the seas, tacitly allowing them access to many of their exclusive sea areas for transit and fishing. Only in the Dark Sea, even after the sea tribes fully opened their shipping rights, did merchant ships and fishing fleets rarely visit. Later, Lambert's ancestors discovered this area. Through over 100 years of trade and material assistance with the small tribes here, they gradually cultivated a favorable cooperative relationship and, through leasing islands and reefs, created a perfect safe haven for their family. The land here is devoid of soil or vegetation. It's completely covered in this fine, sandy black mineral. This must be the deposited material from an underwater volcanic eruption, right? Harvey poked the ground with his toe, stirring up a thin layer of fine black sand. Lambert nodded. Indeed, magical plants can't be grown here. All the supplies and magical materials we need for the time being will depend entirely on the stockpiles we brought with us, as well as the smuggled shipments from the Harrods. Harvey patted his old friend on the shoulder, understandingly offering solace. I think you've somewhat misjudged the situation in the southern border. While the church does claim the plague in central China was the work of necromancers, the Union hasn't substantiated this accusation. There's no need to panic like this, scare your entire clan into migrating over the slightest hint of danger. Lambert gave a wry smile, glancing sideways at his fellow tribesmen, white and black, who were following behind him. Just as he was about to explain, they turned around a massive reef ahead, and the view behind them suddenly opened up, a vast, open expanse covered in fine black sand, dotted with a uniquely styled spellcasting camp. A delicate gray felt tent featured a line-drawn skull, centered by a magical ring of tiny inscriptions, the Lambert family's undead emblem. In the center of the camp stood several tall, peaked tents, likely used for meetings or conferences. The camp was bustling with people, seemingly servants busy carrying supplies. But Harvey knew for sure, those pale, stiff-limbed figures were merely refining zombie puppets. A man in a gray-black robe and a rather comical, pointed hat with a folded corner emerged from the camp to greet them. Well, you've finally returned safely. It seems our apprentices didn't suffer too much loss. The man in the hat didn't bother to exchange pleasantries. He quickly checked the apprentices' undead insignias, identifying them, and then led them into the camp to their respective quarters. Lambert, smiling, pointed at his back and introduced him, my cousin William Lambert. He's a rather unsociable and taciturn fellow. He clearly saw your unfamiliar face just now, but he deliberately ignored us and didn't even acknowledge us. Harvey shrugged, dismissing the matter as unrelated. Then, several more people walked out of the camp and came quickly to them. The white-bearded old man in the lead was not wearing the ridiculous traditional necromancer robes, but the standard regular dress of the southern nobles. He stared at Harvey for a few seconds, turned his head and frowned, complaining to Lambert, Ash, didn't I remind you not to accept other foreign undead spellcasters to join us during emergencies? Why did you still bring people back without permission? Lambert scratched his head awkwardly and explained, this is my classmate and close friend when I was studying at the St. Valen Undead Academy. He is not an outsider. I invited him on my own initiative. Please forgive my recklessness. The old man snorted lightly and turned his gloomy and sharp eyes to Harvey. This will not happen again, but please don't walk around here casually. Your classmate and close friend should stay in the camp, otherwise we can't guarantee his safety. He paused and added meaningfully, sometimes curiosity will bring unnecessary disasters to our guests. Lambert nodded repeatedly and pulled Harvey's sleeve and went into a single felt tent. Wow. Ash, you didn't forget to enjoy yourself even during your refuge period. Harvey stood in the spacious tent which was as large as 20 to 30 square meters and looked around. He couldn't help but admire, felt tents, handmade carpets, soft and comfortable beds, there's even a small sandalwood bookcase and a portable laboratory table. Lambert smiled bitterly and said, don't tease me. What kind of life did I live in the academy back then, and what kind of life am I living now? How can this be compared? He poured 2 glasses of water from an exquisitely crafted long-necked crystal bottle and handed it to Harvey. "Try it. The Kong Song, a specialty of the Sea People, is a fermented drink with a unique flavor. It has a very good effect on the recovery of mental strength." Harvey took a sip and felt as if he was chewing candy through the wrapping paper. There was taste, but the taste buds were very slow to react. This was because the soul puppet was too far away from the physical body, so Harvey could only use the alien space characteristics of the magic network to ensure the continuous connection between his consciousness and the puppet through magic pattern positioning. "Okay, now you should tell me why you and your family were so hastily relocated from the Southern Territory, and why you evaded the Union's battlefield rotation." Lambert sank down on the bed, pinching his brow with a headache. He paused before explaining: "Church persecution, discrimination against Orthodox spellcasters, the nobles' expulsion of us, they were all excuses, just excuses to come here." He looked up at Harvey and said sternly, "Remember when I mentioned the cult of the dead back in the academy?" Harvey paused, struggling to recall. Lambert seemed to have mentioned the cult of the dead, and had urged him to keep it strictly secret. It was a dark council of spellcasters led by necromancers. In ancient times, they seem to have been known as the light and dark factions of spellcasters, alongside the ancient wizard council. It was for this reason that, for centuries, the cult of the dead had been the primary target of the Church of Light's suppression and eradication. But just before the Spellcaster Union was officially established, the core members and organization of the Dark Council suddenly vanished from view, with no further activity reported for the next 100 years. With the Church and the Union's deliberate concealment and weakening, the many ancient secrets of the necromancer cult gradually faded from the horizons of the new generation of spellcasters. By the time Harvey and his group of academic necromancers came around, even hearing about them was rare. "Actually, the undead cult has never truly died out," Lambert said in a deep voice. "My family's ancestors used to be one of the core members of this Dark Council. Our family has only been able to thrive and develop to this day thanks to the undead heritage accumulated by the cult over hundreds of years." He paused, glanced at the door curtain of the felt tent with a somewhat panicked look, lowered his head and whispered in Harvey's ear, "A year ago, my father, the current head of the family, suddenly received news that the previous speaker of the cult had died unexpectedly. Then my father was elected as the new speaker, and immediately began to perform the inauguration ceremony that had lasted for hundreds of years." Harvey nodded in some confusion and asked, "Isn't this great? Congratulate Uncle Lambert for me. If I had known earlier, I should have brought him an extra gift to congratulate him." Lambert rolled his eyes and said hurriedly, "What's so good about it?" "Harvey, the speaker's inauguration ceremony is the transformation ceremony of the Lich. Once the ceremony is over, my father will become an undead monster who has completely lost his humanity, his consciousness is distorted, and he will be gradually eroded by evil will." Chapter 324, The Lich's Plague. Lich Transformation Ritual. Harvey's eyes widened in surprise, and he demanded in disbelief, "Lambert, are you kidding me? The Lich Transformation Ritual has been lost since the Age of Dragons." Lambert smiled wryly and shook his head, explaining, "Yes, the traditional rituals were long lost, but the esoteric cult has recreated a completely new method of transformation, and has proven successful on several chancellors." Harvey narrowed his eyes and carefully recalled some of the hidden historical anecdotes he had learned during his time at the Undead Academy. A high-level undead or shadow caster with no hope of reaching legendary status could seek to transform into an undead creature before their lifespan expired, but this was only a possible attempt. In a sense, the Lich transformation ritual was no less difficult and risky than that of a legendary caster. It involved extracting life essence, crafting a soul vessel, and infusing it with the blood of ancient divine creatures. Finally, through a complex dark ritual, the entire soul and flesh were sacrificed, completing the twisted cycle of life, death, and resurrection. "So, you've come to this secluded location to complete the Lich's transformation ritual," Harvey said to Lambert sternly. "This is insane. Regardless of whether the transformation succeeds or not, it will inevitably cause abnormal fluctuations in the Li line. This is, after all, a twisted ritual that forcibly rewrites the very laws of magic." At the very least, the Radiant Church's demon slayers, closely monitoring the Li line, would immediately spring to action, swarming towards the Lambert family like sharks at the scent of blood. Furthermore, the Union boasts 3 legendary spellcasters skilled in Li line roaming. These orthodox spellcasters would never sit idly by and watch the birth of an undead monster completely devoid of humanity and consumed by evil will. Lambert said in a daze, God of the necromancer. Harvey, when did you know so much profound and mysterious magical knowledge? The last time we communicated, you were only a junior spellcaster. I'm already an intermediate level now. Harvey was too lazy to talk too much nonsense with him, stood up and urged, Lambert, why don't you come with me? The southern continent is not without a foothold for necromancers. I run a huge spellcaster territory in the border wasteland in the central part of the continent, where I can learn magical knowledge safely and conduct magical research freely. Although this guy seems to have a noble status in the family and bears the identity of the patriarch's legitimate son, it is obvious that his ability and talent are too poor, and he has not been trained as a successor. Even his two brothers, White and Black, seem to be much stronger than him. While the Harrow merchant's ship needed 3 days to resupply in the Dark Sea, Harvey figured he could quietly abscond with Lambert, the neglected good-for-nothing young master. The remaining necromancers and Lambert's family would surely be fully absorbed in the ritual preparations and wouldn't spare any extra attention. Lambert nodded, half comprehending, then said anxiously, abscond secretly? But what about all these antiques I've brought with me? This is a treasure I've accumulated over a decade. Every piece is a treasure I can't part with. This second-generation mage's greatest passion wasn't studying magic, but collecting rare antiques dating from the ancient dragon era to the Betrayal War. The rarer and more interesting the item, the more willing he was to spend a fortune. Harvey rolled his eyes speechlessly as he surveyed the 4 or 5 exquisite boxes in the felt tent, devoid of any magical energy. I really don't know how to say hello. Don't worry, I have a way to transfer your treasures in advance, and I guarantee that none of them will be lost. Lambert was relieved at this point, and asked in a low voice with a look of joy, That's great, I haven't wanted to stay in this damp and dark ghost place for a long time. When are we going to run away? Harvey thought for a moment. I have just arrived, and I must still be under the attention of your compatriots. 3 days later, on the eve of the return of the Harlow Chamber of Commerce's ship, you can use the excuse of taking me to visit the coastline. For the next 2 days, Harvey stayed in the spellcaster camp very obediently, either reading in Lambert's felt tent, or occasionally having academic exchanges with some necromancers who arrived here earlier than him. These people were not members of the cult or the Lambert family. Most of them were persecuted because of the plague in the central part of the continent and were forced to move here for refuge. Harvey keenly noticed that the Lambert family members, suspected to be members of the cult, weren't often active in the spellcaster camp. Even White and Black, who had brought him there, had vanished from the camp since yesterday, their whereabouts unknown. Harvey knew they were preparing for the supposed lich transmutation ritual somewhere hidden nearby, but he had no intention of getting involved, so he wasn't particularly concerned about their furtive behavior. Harvey, I'm going to see my father, then I'll pack up and run away with you. Late in the evening, Lambert returned to the camp and arranged to leave at midnight. Before that, he decided to see his father, even as a brief farewell. Don't let him see you're trying to escape, or we might both get stuck, Harvey warned, frowning. Lambert chuckled and said, Don't worry. I won't say I'm leaving outright. Besides, my father won't mind much, since I'm not his only son anyway. With that, Lambert hurriedly left the spellcaster camp. Harvey stayed in his felt tent, fetching the magic solvent and quill for a makeshift teleportation array, and quickly scribbled on the expensive handmade carpet Lambert had spread on the floor. With a magic web teleportation array, Lambert's pile of expensive junk could be instantly teleported back to the wasteland territory, directly to the underground laboratory of Harvey Castle, where it would be received by Arslan and Reiner, who took turns on duty around the clock. As for their escape route, they naturally returned the same way they had come. After arriving at Erisburg via the Harlow Chamber of Commerce, they would use the Continental Teleportation Array of the Federation branch there to travel to the Wizarding Kingdom of Danius, and then teleport again to Jackdaw Town. After packing up and taking care of everything, Harvey sat leisurely in his tent, flipping through a book, waiting for Lambert's return and the approach of midnight. 2 hours passed. 3 hours passed. As the silvery moon, shrouded in thick fog, rose into the sky, the curtain of the felt tent was suddenly yanked open. The visitors were White and Black, who had disappeared for 2 days. Lambert hadn't returned, and Harvey had a vague feeling that something had happened. Sir Harvey, White's face looked a little off, and he seemed to be hesitating whether to speak. But Black interrupted him, saying bluntly, Sir, I'm afraid something has happened to Lambert. What's wrong? Harvey frowned and stood up. That guy probably couldn't help but tell you about a certain ritual we're performing, right? Blake's face was solemn. The ritual had originally lasted for more than 10 days, but something unusual happened at noon today. The elders of the tribe and the counselors thought that something went wrong with the sacrifices and offerings required for the ritual. Harvey narrowed his eyes, suppressed his anger and interrupted the other party's explanation. What does the problem have to do with Lambert? You even got the blood of divine creatures. You don't really need the help of a mid-level necromancer to complete a lich's transformation ritual, do you? He paused and asked through gritted teeth. Or, because the ritual showed signs of failure, some stupid guys tried to use blood sacrifice to reverse the failed transformation of the cult speaker who was transforming into a monster. White took a few steps back and said in a trembling voice, how do you know everything? Even Lambert doesn't know the secrets of these rituals. We should thank the Spellcaster Forum's magic encyclopedia. Harvey muttered silently. Enough of the nonsense. Since you've come to me, you don't want Lambert to die in vain, right? Harvey said as he bent down, lifted the thick velvet blanket from his feet, turned it over, picked up the discarded magic solvent, and began to draw the array. Yes, we do want to save Lambert, Blake muttered softly. That damned secret religion and ritual, it disgusts us like a rotten corpse buried in the earth for centuries. The new generation of undead spellcasters like them had no desire to pursue those decadent undead traditions, but because of their spellcasting faction, they had to endure the oppression of secular values and the discrimination of orthodox spellcasters. It was a classic dilemma. When do they plan to start the blood sacrifice? Midnight. Only then is the most appropriate time. White looked at Harvey, who was busy drawing the formation diagram, and wondered, what are you going to do? Don't we need to go to the ceremony site immediately and find a way to rescue Lambert? Harvey rolled his eyes and complained, just the three of us going? Facing a group of senators of the necromancer cult and those mid and high-level undead spellcasters from your two families? You won't forget that I'm just a body puppet that contains consciousness and mental power, right? He stuffed the magic solvent and feather pen in his hand into the stunned White's hand, and ordered decisively, if you want to save people, do as I say, Blake. Go to the stone cave where the zombies and corpse puppets are sleeping next to the camp, and pick up all those guys for me. Don't deliberately control them. Let them run out of control in the camp. It's best to attract everyone's attention. A blush crept across Blake's pale face, and he mumbled, I don't have enough magic power to awaken all the zombies. I've only just reached the intermediate level. The zombies must have eaten your brain, Harvey said speechlessly. I gave each of you a bag of shadow magic stones. Activate them with magic and throw them into the pile of corpses. They'll instantly be more lively than when they were alive. Blake immediately understood and hurriedly opened the tent and left. White, stunned, held the solvents and quill. Sir Harvey, what about me? Help me draw demon summoning circle. I need to perform a demon summoning ritual from another dimension. Of course, the three of them couldn't rescue Lambert on their own, so Harvey's only thought was to quickly mobilize help. Chapter 325. Calling for help. Evil, a demon summoning circle. White's hand trembled as he gripped the quill, but he didn't stop drawing the circle. Sir, are we going to commandeer a demon to forcibly invade the ritual and rescue Lambert? Harvey shook his head. Honestly, he had no desire to antagonize these necromancers. His years as a student with Lambert had given him a good understanding of the undead family his friend came from. They were indeed a family of spellcasters devoted to the pursuit of truth and knowledge. While they specialized in the lesser-known undead faction, they generally acted within the bounds of propriety. Throughout their century-long existence in Daius, the family had never been embroiled in rumors of bloody and sinister sorcery research. Their corpses were sourced from clean sources, purchased and stored from corpse dealers. But they were particularly cruel to him. According to Lambert, he wasn't truly the eldest son in the family. He had two older brothers and an older sister who had died in accidents involving sorcery experiments and in sorcery duels caused by academic disputes within the family. Harvey saw this as pure self-inflicted destruction, a reflection of his own actions. It also underscored why, after Lambert reached adulthood and became a spellcaster, he had chosen to live a life of idleness and pleasure, completely ignoring his ambition. We'll avoid using force to rescue Lambert unless absolutely necessary. Harvey had a plan in mind. Do you know how many mid-level and higher spellcasters were present at the ceremony? White pondered for a moment before replying. Among the clan, only the patriarch himself is high level. There's also a newly promoted high-level member of the cult, but the rest are mostly mid and low-level spellcasters, with only 2 high-level spellcasters, one of whom was still undergoing the ritual's transformation and likely incapable of attacking. Harvey would only have to face a high-level necromancer. Even if he resorted to violence, he would only have to face a high-level necromancer, and summoning Mr. Inner Demon through the ritual would easily subdue him. The magic solution used in the summoning ritual's formation was liquid mithril, a substance with the highest magical properties. While it wasn't cheap, Lambert had collected a full bottle, seemingly unused, which came in handy. If the ritual offerings were in the wasteland, Harvey would have preferred innovative local delicacies favored by Mr. Inner Demon. After all, they held a powerful force of desire, stemming from the chef's burgeoning satisfaction and the yearning of those who savored them. But in this spellcaster camp, aside from food, there was nothing to eat except water and salted bread. Harvey rummaged through Lambert's felt tent, retrieving several antiques patinated with care. These items looked like Lambert's favorites, and he undoubtedly frequently examined them. Though they held only Lambert's desire, they were undoubtedly intense, a perfect substitute for ordinary offerings, swiftly capturing Mr. Inner Demon's attention and fixation through the ritual stimulation. With White's assistance, the two quickly mastered the summoning circle. Since drawing the circle required a significant infusion of one's own magic power to activate it, and Harvey, now merely a spirit puppet, had to delegate the entire task of infusion to White, nearly draining the stored magic power from his veins. Cold sweat dripped down his already pale face. After the summoning circle activated, a subtle surge of turbulent energy from another dimension could be felt within the tent. Harvey quickly recited the summoning spell 3 times, and soon a thick, dark red mist rose from the center of the circle. Then, within the mist, an irregular, door-shaped cavity slowly coalesced. A figure with overly slender arms and legs, a tall and thin body, and a slightly twisted figure slowly emerged from the hole. A crack similar to an eyeball suddenly appeared on the head of the twisted figure, and a series of voices as if countless people were talking at the same time rang out immediately. White felt a sharp pain in his head and quickly retreated to a corner of the tent, not daring to look up. Mr. Kilthuzid, the inner demon lifted his long legs and stepped out of the space rift condensed by the summoning circle. The agreed visit day hasn't arrived yet. Why are you summoning me in advance? He turned his head slightly and looked around, only to find that he seemed not to be in the familiar lord's castle. What's going on? Harvey smiled and nodded, explaining, it happened suddenly. I am currently on an island reef in the sea. I summoned you to seek some help. The inner demon nodded, squinted his one eye and pretended to take a deep breath. Depression, coldness, numbness and a hint of unexpected fanaticism. There are more dead things than living people here. To be honest, the environment is worse than the public restroom in the frontier territory. Mr. Devil's complaints and sarcasm are always so unconventional and interesting. It's a pity that Harvey has no time to joke and chat with him now. I need your assistance in stopping a ritual in progress, or more precisely, reversing a ritual doomed to fail. The inner demon nodded in understanding, reaching out with its long arms to casually grab Lambert's treasured antiques from the tent for inspection, while motioning for Harvey to continue explaining the situation. Huddled in a corner, silent, White cautiously raised his head, surprised to find that the objects touched and caressed by the twisted demon had, contrary to common sense, suddenly lost their luster, as if they had been buried for millennia and had just been unearthed, dark and decayed. This is an ancient lich transformation ritual. I'm sure you, Mr. Inner Demon, must have heard of this kind of ritual in the long past. The inner demon nodded honestly. Yes, it's rare, but I once witnessed a transformation process of this kind of ritual. He put down a porcelain cup in his hand and commented with some irony, I have to say, you humans have indeed come up with many shocking operations in the pursuit of immortality. Lich transformation? Haha, trying to circumvent the natural law of the ephemeral lifespan by extracting the life essence and soul core. The first person to come up with this method is truly a mad genius. Harvey glanced at the sky through the air vent of the tent and made a long story short. The lich transformation ritual requires the extraction of life essence rich in human nature and desire. So I thought that perhaps you could help extract this part of willpower and desire from it and re-inject it into the person undergoing the transformation ritual. This might be able to reverse the progress of the ritual and achieve the purpose of preventing its failure. The inner demon was stunned for a moment, staring at Harvey with his enormous, single eye. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, I take back my praise for the lich ritual, Mr. Kilthuzid. Compared to you, you are a true genius. with ideas more radical than madness. I wonder how many surprising ideas you have in your head. He pointed at White, who was huddled in a corner, silent, and chuckled. Is this the vessel prepared for my advent? Without a physical vessel, I can't help you achieve your goal. White shuddered and looked at Harvey in panic, his eyes filled with pleading and rejection. This was a demon, a high-level demon with sanity and reason, capable of normal communication with humans. If you were used as a vessel for his advent, his brain would probably be scrambled to pieces, turning him into an idiot. Harvey was speechless, then smiled and shook his head. No, this is a new friend of mine, not a vessel. Mr. Inner Demon, you don't mind sharing a body with me, do you? End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.